If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1, Important Notes. Hello there. I have finally returned after taking a hiatus from writing for 3 long years. I must admit, the excitement bubbling inside me is hard to contain. I've hit a new milestone with the latest chapters and can proudly say I've leveled up. If you're keen on reading 15 chapters ahead of the schedule and supporting me directly, you can do so here. Patreon.com/mythost. Before you dive back into the story, please leave a review with some world recommendations for the MC to conquer and give this book a vote to help it climb the leaderboard with your power stones. Thanks. Much love. Mythost. Chapter 2, Chapter 1, Nuclear Strike. I lost again, muttered the man as he silently made his way out of the basketball court. Hey, it's all right to lose. We made it to the top 3. Let's celebrate tonight. Andrew said he'll treat us at a bar a few blocks away, one of his teammates called out, his voice echoing across the stadium. Upon hearing this, the man paused in his tracks for a moment, contemplating the words. No, we lost. He corrected himself, recognizing the essence of basketball as a team sport. But why were his teammates seemingly content with such a result? Why were they even celebrating after another loss? He couldn't help but feel like he was the only one taking this tournament seriously. He turned his gaze towards the opposing team, observing them engaged in cheerful conversation. They were the contenders for victory, while his own team was merely an unexpected underdog that had managed to secure a spot in the top 3 through sheer luck. His team lacked any standout players, and he himself was no exception. Despite his relentless training, honing his body and mastering strategies, despite his deep understanding of various techniques, it all boiled down to his inherent lack of talent in executing them. The man, who had been fervently chasing his dreams, felt crushed under the weight of his own limitations. He had poured his heart and soul into his endeavors yet reaped no rewards in return. Only a hollow chuckle escaped his lips, a silent mockery of his own futile efforts. As he reached the parking lot, he made his way to his car, but before he could step inside, his phone rang. Retrieving it from his pocket, he saw an email from one of the companies he was associated with, notifying him of massive losses incurred in their rivalry. Sighing heavily, he took a seat and muttered, perhaps this is a curse. I can never excel in anything I do. He had never been blessed with a privileged upbringing. Throughout his life, he had never been encouraged to chase his dreams. His conservative parents had always emphasized the pursuit of mediocrity, the pursuit of a stable and ordinary life. However, surrendering to his circumstances was never an option for him, so he persisted. While his peers spent their teenage years engrossed in video games, he was already hustling, selling shoes in the town at the tender age of 15. While others indulged in college parties, he had already founded his first company. He was a true self-made millionaire, a testament to his unwavering determination and relentless drive. Yet, merely attaining millionaire status did not satiate his thirst for excellence. It was ingrained deep within his soul that in every endeavor he pursued, he aimed for nothing less than the very best. Some called him an extremist, and in a way, they were not entirely wrong. He had never truly experienced the carefree notion of fun in his life. The only moments of joy he found were on the basketball court, in the realm of culinary arts, and within the confines of combat. However, his lack of natural talent in any of these haunted him, and he couldn't dedicate his earlier years to train like his peers could, as he was preoccupied with piecing his life together. Let's just head home, he murmured, a tinge of resignation evident in his voice, as he steered his car towards his opulent mansion. While making his way to his mansion, the man tuned into the news, learning about the escalating tensions in the world and the looming threat of a potential nuclear strike. His brows furrowed as he contemplated the situation, vocalizing his thoughts. If such a catastrophic event were to occur, the economy would suffer a massive blow. Perhaps I should consider investing in more gold. However, a somber realization dampened his train of thought. But it wouldn't be a laughing matter if a nuclear strike were to actually take place in this vicinity. Shaking his head, he reaffirmed his decision. In times of crisis, it was wiser to prioritize safety over regret. Upon arriving at his mansion, he reached for a bottle of whiskey, seeking solace in its numbing embrace. The liquid poured into the glass, attempting to drown his sorrows in his own personal way. Yet, just a few minutes into his solitary session, as he reached for another bottle, his gaze fell upon an enigmatic letter resting on the bar counter. Its origin remained unknown, devoid of any sender's name or identifiable markings. However, it posed a thought-provoking question. What if you could start anew? What if you could conquer the world and become the greatest? Even in his intoxicated state, he couldn't help but burst into laughter, mocking himself. How desperate must I be to entertain such absurd notions? They say desperate times call for desperate measures, and in that moment, he knew it to be true. However, if only it were real, he murmured, shaking his head in regret. Even if it takes 100 or even 1,000 years, I will conquer all that stands before me. As a sudden realization struck him, he hurled the whiskey bottle from his left hand, shattering it upon impact. The sound of glass fragments scattering echoed through the room. That's right, I shouldn't wallow in self-indulgence. I still have a dream to chase. It was a narrow escape, he had come dangerously close to losing his grip and succumbing to his fate. While there were many things beyond his control, his state of mind was not one of them. Making his way to the sofa for some rest, he muttered, my emotions hold no sway. Whether I wake up with joy or despair, my goals remain unchanged. Sinking into the comfort of the sofa, he reached a resolute conclusion. I will not bow to the whims of fate. And with fiery determination blazing in his eyes, he shattered the haze of despondency, breathing new life into his gaze. I will become the very best, he declared, his words ringing with unwavering resolve. Unbeknownst to him, as he made his way to the sofa, the mysterious letter inexplicably vanished into thin air, as if by some enchanting magic. Oblivious to this strange occurrence, he settled himself on the sofa and drifted off into a deep slumber. Meanwhile, just a few kilometers away from his city, a solitary jet loomed ominously above the vast expanse of the sea. A voice crackled through the cockpit's speakers, issuing a chilling command, the enemy approaches. Initiate nuclear strike in 3, 2, 1. As the night gave way to the next day, the world awakened to a harrowing reality. News outlets blared the solemn announcement that war had been officially declared, accompanied by the devastating destruction of an entire city. Chapter 3, Chapter 2, started over from the beginning. In a large mansion with a fancy European-style design, a little boy, only 9 years old, was reading a book in a small house in the garden. The house was cozy, surrounded by beautiful flowers and trees. The book he was reading had a pretty advanced title called The Way of the Conqueror. It was all about how to be strong and powerful in today's society. The boy paused momentarily, gazing up at the sky, feeling slightly amazed that he had somehow ended up in this new world. It didn't make any sense to him, completely defying any scientific explanation. He couldn't help but think back to the mysterious letter he had received the night before he arrived here. His face scrunched up in a frown as he tried to understand everything. He wondered if he had died in his old world and somehow ended up in this young body. Or perhaps he had brought this upon himself by talking about a nuclear strike, and some strange force had whisked him away to this place. No matter what, I still died, hey! He whispered softly to himself. Death was a strange concept for him, especially since he didn't believe in any higher power. He knew that everyone eventually died, and he accepted that fact. But to actually experience it firsthand was something that lingered in his mind, unable to be easily dismissed. Before long, a middle-aged man with white hair dressed in a butler uniform approached the boy. He had a distinguished air about him as he bowed and informed the young master, "Madam would like to see you, sir." Upon hearing the butler's words, the boy closed his eyes gently and carefully placed the book back onto the bookshelf. He shifted his attention to the butler bowing respectfully before him. "Okay, let's go, Sabas," the boy said calmly, indicating his readiness to follow. Sabas, the butler, immediately straightened his back and took the lead. Despite the boy's mature demeanor, which was beyond his age, Sabas didn't appear surprised at all. To him, the boy's behavior perfectly reflected his position as the heir to the esteemed family that Sabas served. Sabas guided the boy through the garden and into a long hallway, their footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. Eventually, they reached an imposing door that led to the madam's study. Sabas knocked gently on the door, his voice loud enough to be heard within the room. "Madam, young Master Tsuna is here," Sabas announced respectfully, bowing as he spoke. "Come in," a soothing and gentle voice responded from inside the room. Sabas opened the door, stepping to the side to allow his young master to enter. The boy, who was now identified as Tsuna, nodded in acknowledgement to Sabas before stepping into the room. Sabas responded with another bow, a gesture of respect, before closing the door behind them. Tsuna turned towards his mother, a woman in her 40s with shiny black hair that fell to her shoulders. She had a slender figure and a well-proportioned face, wrinkles here and there, but they only added to her beauty. "Mother, is there anything I can do for you?" Suna calmly asked, his voice carrying an intimate tone that only a loving son would use. Spending a lot of time with his mother, Suna had grown fond of her and loved her deeply. His mother smiled warmly, rising from her chair and walking over to the sofa. She motioned for Tsuna to come closer, and he willingly complied, the two of them embracing and cuddling on the soft cushions. "My dear son, you don't have to be so formal with mommy," she playfully remarked, gently running her fingers through Tsuna's hair. Tsuna cherished his mother's affectionate gestures, closing his eyes with a contented smile on his face. His mother continued the conversation. "Sabas mentioned that you wanted to play basketball, is that true?" Tsuna nodded in confirmation, expressing his interest in the sport. "I see. But what about your education?" Her tone turned serious. Education held great importance in their family, ensuring that their children were well prepared to take over the family businesses in the future. She continued, "If you add basketball to your current schedule, you won't have enough time for studying." Suna looked directly into his mother's gentle eyes, his gaze unwavering, as he responded, "Mom, I'm done with my studies. You know it too. There's hardly any subject left for me to finish." His mother sighed, acknowledging the truth in Tsuna's words. He had displayed exceptional intellect from a very young age. Although he was only 9, Tsuna had already completed high school level materials. However, Tsuna understood the power of knowledge. Despite being a self-made millionaire in his previous life with considerable business acumen, he chose not to reveal everything at once. It would be too overwhelming and unrealistic to showcase his full capabilities. "Then why did you insist on attending a regular school before?" his mother inquired. For the past year, Tsuna had faithfully attended a public school near their neighborhood. His reason was to verify something he had noticed: a sense of familiarity in two boys he had seen around. One had red hair, and the other had black hair. Considering that they were all Japanese, living in Los Angeles, USA, Tsuna decided to investigate further. And he could confidently conclude that this world was the perfect world for him to realize his dreams in his past life. "I thought I could make friends my own age there," Tsuna casually replied, coming up with a reason on the spot, which saddened his mother. "I've even seen fellow Japanese at school, too bad we rarely communicated at all." In reality, Tsuna hardly had any friends. Despite his young age, he possessed an aura of authority that emanated from someone of a higher status, making others feel intimidated, even those older than him. His father believed that Tsuna had a natural inclination for leadership, but that was far from the truth. Due to this reason, Tsuna has been homeschooled ever since, with limited social interactions. Despite Tsuna's limited interactions with peers his own age, much to his parents' relief, he exhibited surprising communication skills whenever they attended family gatherings. "Well, we do have some empty space next to our house," his mother smiled warmly, continuing, "We can build a basketball court there." "Thank you, Mom." Tsuna expressed his gratitude, their bond growing stronger as they continued to share intimate conversations and spend quality time together. Chapter 4, Chapter 3, Alexandra Garcia. On that day, Tsuna's mother hired a construction company to build a basketball court just for him. It had been a month since then, and Sabas, the butler, guided Tsuna to the court. As Tsuna looked around, he was truly impressed with what he saw. The court was like a professional outdoor court, complete with benches for resting and a storage area for basketballs. The sight exceeded Tsuna's expectations, and he couldn't help but take out a basketball from the storage on the side of the court. Swiftly, Tsuna began dribbling the ball, a familiar sensation flooding over him. Holding the ball in his hands, he couldn't help but grin like a child who had just received their favorite toy. The rhythmic sound of the ball bouncing against the court floor filled Tsuna with nostalgia. It reminded him of how that sound used to wash away his worries in his previous life. As Tsuna continued to dribble the ball, he could feel the motion and rhythm, despite knowing that he had lost the muscle memory he once had. He was a bit out of practice, but simply playing with the ball excited him. With his young body, Tsuna knew that he could train as hard as his peers or even harder. Unlike in his past life, he now had a better starting point, so he wouldn't feel the same frustration he experienced when he hit a talent bottleneck just because he started later in life. Tsuna swiftly dribbled the ball, heading towards the hoop with determination. He executed a flawless layup shot, the ball smoothly gliding into the basket. Retrieving the ball, he dribbled it towards the center, carefully angling his shot, and effortlessly scored another point. Sabas, observing from the sidelines, couldn't help but be surprised by Tsuna's excitement and skill. "Young master," Sabas murmured, still in awe, "it seems he can truly act his age." Having cared for Tsuna since he was just a baby, Sabas felt a mix of relief and joy for his young master. Tsuna's exceptional maturity, while impressive, also carried a tinge of sadness. At his age, he should have been playing and enjoying carefree moments, but Tsuna had been dedicated to upholding his family's legacy. A woman in her 40s entered the basketball court, accompanied by her assistants and a young woman with blonde hair and glasses. Upon seeing her, Sabas respectfully greeted her with a bow and reported, "Welcome, madam. Young master is currently enjoying himself." Giving a slight nod, the middle-aged woman fixed her gaze on Tsuna, who was happily engrossed in playing basketball alone. Like Sabas, Tsuna's mother became emotional, her eyes welling up with tears. It was heartwarming for her to witness her son finally embracing his age, joyfully playing basketball, and letting go of his worries. The blonde-haired woman scratched her head, uncertain of what to do in this situation. Both Sabas and the madam seemed content to simply watch Tsuna playing on his own. Turning her attention to the boy, the woman couldn't help but be surprised. The boy's techniques initially appeared rough, but he rapidly improved astoundingly. "What in the world?" she muttered silently, taken aback by the unexpected progress. Originally, she had taken this job for the high salary, expecting to train a 9-year-old boy who had never touched a basketball before. Her expectations were modest. But now, as she observed the boy, she couldn't resist turning to Tsuna's mother, asking with curiosity, "Madam, did your son truly start playing basketball today?" Perplexed, Tsuna's mother replied, "Yes, to my knowledge." "Why do you ask?" The woman fell silent, although she had anticipated the answer, hearing it directly left her speechless. She carefully chose her words, stating, "Then your son possesses genuine talent. The way he naturally grasps essential skills, it's as if he was born to play basketball. I'm confident that he could become a top player in the NBA in the future." Hearing the compliment filled Tsuna's mother with contentment. As a mother, any praise bestowed upon her son felt like praise for herself. However, a frown creased her forehead when the woman mentioned the prospect of Tsuna becoming a professional basketball player. She doubted that her husband would allow their son to pursue a career in basketball. Yet, witnessing the sheer joy on Tsuna's face as he played, she felt it was necessary to discuss the matter with her husband. Fully absorbed in his basketball play, Tsuna couldn't help but turn his head when he noticed a few people watching him from the side. Spotting his mother among them, Tsuna waved enthusiastically and walked over to join them. "Hi, Mom. What brings you here?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. He glanced at the blonde-haired woman standing beside his mother, trying to figure out who she was. "Tsuna, this is Alexandra Garcia. She was the NCAA champion during her time at UCLA," Tsuna's mother explained with a smile, introducing the blonde-haired woman to him. Tsuna's mother continued, "I invited her here to provide you with basketball training." "Thanks, Mom. I could definitely use some guidance to improve my basketball skills," Tsuna replied with a gentle smile, expressing his gratitude. As the mother and son interacted, Alexandra couldn't help but be amazed by Tsuna's maturity, which surpassed his young age. "Well then, I'll leave him in your capable hands, Ms. Garcia," Tsuna's mother said kindly as she exited the court, followed by her assistants. Tsuna bid them goodbye with a wave of his hand. "Absolutely, madam," Alexandra replied with a reassuring smile, giving a salute. Tsuna shifted his complete attention to Alexandra, and a distant memory from his past suddenly resurfaced. Alexandra was a champion basketball player who later joined the WNBA. Unfortunately, her professional basketball career was cut short due to an unknown illness that affected her vision. Struggling to face this setback, she resorted to playing street basketball for money. However, her path crossed with Taiga Kagami and Tatsuya Himuro, who approached her with a request for basketball lessons. As the two boys grew more passionate about the game, Alexandra's initial annoyance transformed into genuine joy as she embraced the role of their mentor. But as Tsuna observed her now, she didn't appear to be retired. He could sense vibrant energy radiating from her, indicating that she still possessed a strong passion for the sport. "So, shall we begin?" Tsuna calmly addressed Alexandra. Alexandra couldn't help but notice that Tsuna's demeanor felt distinctively different when he was with his mother. It surprised her, but Sabas seemed unfazed, standing by the side. This seemed to be Tsuna's usual demeanor when interacting with new people. Although taken aback, Alexandra simply shrugged it off, flashing a grin as she responded, "Let's play a one-on-one game then." Chapter 5, Chapter 4, Patriarch of the Kazama. It's been a few weeks since Tsuna has started training with Alexandra. Despite being young, Tsuna showed capability above his age as he tried his best to keep up with Alexandra's training plan. At the moment, Tsuna was walking behind Sabas as he was guided to his father's office room. Their family, Kazama, was once a prestigious conglomerate in Japan. However, for certain reason, their family went to the US. Although the older generation in the family stayed in Japan as they held some important positions in political scene in Japan, they took out their company out of Japan and moved it to the US. Their company was called Orange Company, which was producing the #1 electronics in the world, like Zophone, MacBook, and Orange O Mac. As they walked through the long hallway, Tsuna couldn't help but ask his butler, "Does father say anything to you about why he called me? I apologize for my ignorance, but I wasn't informed with anything else other than to summon you to his office." Sabas, slightly turned his head toward Tsuna, responded politely. "I see," Tsunakami said as he closed his eyes a bit, trying to figure out what his father was about to say. As far as Tsuna could recall, his father usually summoned him only for significant matters, such as attending business gatherings at their mansion or reporting on completed study materials. However, this time felt different. There were no major company events, and Tsuna had already provided updates on his completed studies a few weeks ago. Setting aside his thoughts, Tsuna arrived at the grand door leading to his father's office. Sabas, with respectful demeanor, gently knocked on the door, bowing down as he reported, "Sir, I have brought young master Tsunayashi." It was customary for Sabas to address Tsuna as young master, but due to his father's prominent position as the head of the family, formalities were essential. A majestic voice, carrying an air of authority, responded from inside the room, "Sabas, hey? Come in." Without delay, Sabas opened the door and stepped aside, allowing Tsuna to enter. As Tsuna walked in, he felt an intense pressure emanating from his middle-aged father, Hirutora, who sat behind a desk at the center of the room. Hirutora rested his chin on his hand, slightly opening his eyes as the pressure intensified. Tsuna remained unfazed by this display, projecting his own commanding presence despite his young age. He respectfully bowed to his father, acknowledging their respective statuses. "Father, may I know the reason for summoning me here today?" Tsuna inquired, his voice calm and composed. Hirutora closed his eyes and gestured for Tsuna to take a seat on the sofa. Tsuna nodded silently, settling comfortably on the sofa. Meanwhile, Sabas stood still beside the door. He was accustomed to witnessing the unique power dynamics between the father and son. However, if one were to observe closely, a bead of sweat could be seen rolling down Sabas' neck under the pressure. For Sabas, despite having witnessed the scene multiple times, it served as a reminder of the extraordinary presence possessed by someone like Tsuna. A presence so commanding that it rivaled that of his father, who had long stood atop the social hierarchy. "Your grandparents have expressed their desire for you to continue your education in Japan. What are your thoughts on this matter?" Hirutora posed the question, his eyes fixed on Tsuna. Upon hearing this, Tsuna's mind delved into contemplation as he carefully considered his response. Despite having completed study materials up to the high school level within the family, his official educational background remained that of an elementary graduate on paper. He had the option to continue homeschooling and pass the necessary tests to obtain a middle school graduation certificate, or he could enroll in a conventional school. Now, with the proposition to return to Japan, it seemed that continuing his studies in a regular school had been decided. However, reflecting on the present circumstances, Tsuna took a deep breath and replied, "May I request 3 years?" Curiosity sparked in Hirutora's eyes upon hearing this request, but he remained unfazed as he sought a reasonable explanation from Tsuna. In their family, personal decisions were highly valued as long as they held reasonable justifications. Tsuna continued, carefully choosing his words, "I still feel quite young to attend middle school, and I believe it would be easier for me to make friends if I join a group of peers who are of similar age in middle school." I see." Hirutora found Tsuna's explanation quite reasonable. "Here's a list of schools you can consider attending in Japan. Although your grandparents live in Shizuoka, there aren't any notable schools there. Just choose a school in Tokyo." Hirutora handed the list to Sabas, who then placed it on the table in front of Tsuna. Although Hirutora didn't explicitly mention Tsuna's potential desire to play more basketball, given the previous reports he had received about Tsuna's fondness for the sport, he chose not to address it. Hirutora realized that Tsuna was still too young to handle the demanding lifestyle that came with their social status. As Tsuna perused the list of schools, one name caught his attention. It felt remarkably familiar to him. If Tsuna were aware of his father's inner thoughts, he would have chuckled at the inaccuracy. He desired more time to train, not simply to play. Because Tsuna's goal for studying in Japan was. Then, I choose Teiko High, Tsuna declared, pointing to the name of the school at the top of the list. Hirutora, upon hearing Tsuna's choice, felt a sense of contentment. Teiko High was one of the top middle schools in Japan, renowned both domestically and internationally, making it an ideal choice for his son. While Hirutora had doubts about what more the school could teach Tsuna, given that he had already completed high school level study materials, he found solace in knowing that the current headmaster of Teiko High was a childhood friend of his. Recalling the vivid image of his friend's shining bald head, Hirutora nodded in approval of Tsuna's decision. Very well, I will inform your grandparents about your decision, Hirutora said lightly. He then added, you may go. Tsuna stood up, offering a slight bow of respect, before making his way toward the door. However, just as he was about to exit the room, his father's voice reached his ears. I heard you've taken up basketball. Tsuna paused in his tracks, turning back to face his father and confirming, yes, that's true. I've been playing basketball for a few weeks now. I see. Hirutora closed his eyes and adjusted his seating position. Curiosity filled his voice as he asked, do you enjoy it? This question caught Tsuna off guard. It was unusual for his father to inquire about his interests in such a manner. Nonetheless, Tsuna's surprise quickly transformed into a warm smile, grateful that his father showed genuine care and concern. I don't just enjoy it, Tsuna paused briefly, his smile widening. I love it, Dad. Hearing Tsuna's heartfelt response, Hirutora's smile mirrored his son's. As Tsuna finally exited the room and Sabas closed the door behind him, leaving Hirutora alone, the aura of strength and authority he exuded crumbled. Tears welled up in his eyes as his heart stuffed with happiness. He just called me Dad. Chapter 6, Chapter 5, Announcement at the Dinner Table. In a spacious basketball court located within a grand mansion, a young man with a height of 165 centimeters and neatly groomed black hair was engaged in a friendly match with a beautiful blonde woman in her mid-twenties. The court echoed with the sound of their sneakers squeaking against the polished floor as they moved swiftly and gracefully. Your progress is unbelievable, Tsuna, the blonde woman remarked, wiping the perspiration off her face. Tsuna simply smiled in response. To him, it was only natural to see such improvement, considering the dedication and hard work he had poured into his passion. The drive to start early and the promise of surpassing his past achievements fueled his hunger for more success. As time flew by, 3 years had already elapsed since Tsuna began his basketball training under the guidance of Alexandra. His incredible talent left Alexandra in awe. Although he had not yet been able to defeat her on the court, it was evident that Tsuna's rapid growth would soon propel him beyond her skills. The day when he would surpass her was just around the corner. They continued playing basketball under the warm sun until noon, their laughter and competitive spirit filling the air. After their intense session, they found respite on a comfortable bench situated conveniently in the court. Curiosity evident in her eyes, Alexandra leaned towards Tsuna and inquired, I heard you're heading to Japan tomorrow, Tsuna. Is that true? The bond they had developed over the years had made her genuinely interested in his plans. Tsuna nodded, wiping the perspiration from his brow with a towel. Yes, I'm going to pursue my studies in Japan. Realizing his young age, Alexandra remarked, oh, right. You're still a middle schooler. She reached for a water bottle and handed it to Tsuna, and he gratefully accepted it, taking a refreshing sip. With genuine interest, Alexandra continued, so, how is basketball over there? Have you done any research about the country? Closing the bottle and securing the lid, Tsuna replied, well, I have a feeling I'll be in for some surprises in Japan. Aware of the diverse and talented individuals he would likely encounter in Japan, Tsuna was indeed expecting the country to offer him some unexpected experiences. Chuckling, Alexandra responded, I hope you get the surprise you're expecting then. I was about to show you around in our neighborhood street ball court but seemed like you got to go. Alexandra said, feeling quite unfortunate that Tsuna had to leave soon. Tsuna smiled warmly, appreciating her enthusiasm. Thanks. Maybe when I return to the US, you can show me around our neighborhood street ball court. Alexandra's face lit up with excitement. Absolutely. Consider it a plan. With the basketball still in her possession, she stood up, ready for another round. Wanna go for another game? Suna matched her enthusiasm and nodded. Sure, let's do it. After wrapping up their game, Alexandra bid farewell as their session for the day came to an end. Heading back to his room, Suna quickly took a shower and got dressed, knowing that his family was gathering for dinner. There was an important announcement to be made during the meal. Walking down the hallway with Sabas by his side, they arrived at the dining room. Suna observed his family members already seated at the table. His father, mother, and older brother were present, along with his brother's fiancée. Suna also noticed an unfamiliar couple engaged in friendly conversation with his parents. As Suna joined the others at the table, his father gestured for him to take a seat. Suna respectfully bowed and gracefully settled into his chair. Son, allow me to introduce you to our future in-laws, Mr. and Mrs. Door, Hiratora said, motioning towards the Door couple. Suna nodded in acknowledgement, and they responded with warm smiles. The Door couple had heard about Hiratora's youngest son, but this was their first time meeting him in person. They were initially taken aback by how someone his age could carry himself with such grace. While Tsuna's elder brother, who was engaged to their daughter, was exceptional, it seemed that his younger brother operated on another level altogether. The Door couple initially felt jealousy towards Hiratora for having such an exceptional son. However, it slowly faded away as they joined forces through the engagement. Now that all of our family members are here, let's officially begin our dinner with an important announcement. Hiratora's authoritative voice filled the room. Our children have been engaged for some time now, and it has been decided that it's time to solidify their relationship through a wedding, which we will be hosting soon. The room erupted with applause, with even the maids and butlers joining in, filling the atmosphere with excitement. Suna raised his hand and clapped, showing his support. He had initially anticipated complications and drama with a sibling in a prominent family like theirs. However, his relationship with his brother was truly exceptional. Their family placed a high value on the bonds of kinship, recognizing that in times of adversity, only family could be relied upon. This belief strengthened their familial ties, building a powerful foundation for their collective success. As they gathered around the dinner table, the room filled with warmth as conversations and laughter filled the air. Suna, I heard you are leaving for Japan tomorrow. Are you all set and prepared? Suna's older brother asked with a smile. Suna turned to his brother and nodded, a hint of excitement in his eyes. Yes, brother, Sabas has taken care of all the preparations. Sabas, standing nearby, acknowledged Suna's words with a respectful bow. Jin, Suna's brother, let out a sigh of relief. That's good to hear. And don't forget, you better make it to my wedding. Suna chuckled, confidently assuring his brother, of course, family matters always come first, regardless of my occupation as a student. Mr. Door chimed in, impressed by Tsuna's eloquence. Your son is truly exceptional, Tora. Hiratora smiled, a mix of pride and contentment in his expression, fully aware of his son's exceptional qualities. The dinner continued with amicable conversations, with everyone happily chatting about various topics. Chapter 7, Chapter 6, Tiako High. The next day, after bidding farewell to his family, Suna boarded his family's private jet bound for Tokyo, accompanied by Sabas, who would serve as his bodyguard during his time in Japan. After an approximately 11-hour flight, they finally landed in Tokyo. As Suna stepped off the private jet, he was greeted by the sight of a waiting car, its driver bowing respectfully. Suna entered the car, with Sabas following after taking care of the luggage. The driver closed the door, and they set off on the highway. Suna's anticipation grew as they drove through the bustling city. The atmosphere in Japan felt distinctly different from Los Angeles, and he couldn't help but notice the sense of safety that permeated the air. After half an hour, they arrived at their destination. Suna's residence in Tokyo was situated near Aoyama, a prestigious neighborhood in the northwest part of Minato Ward, known for its opulent homes and affluent residents. Stepping inside the house, Sabas acted as a guide, showing Suna around the various rooms. From the cozy living room to the well-appointed restrooms, every detail was taken care of. Suna's eyes lit up when he discovered a private swimming pool on the third floor. And to his delight, right behind the house, there was a basketball court, a perfect place for him to continue pursuing his passion. Is there anything on our agenda for today? After the tour of the house, Suna settled into the comfortable living room and turned his attention to Sabas. Yes, we are scheduled to go to Shizuoka this afternoon, Sabas replied, bowing respectfully as he provided the information. Suna nodded serenely upon hearing this and conveyed his instructions to Sabas. All right, I'll take a brief nap then. Please make sure to wake me up 1 hour before we leave. Of course, understood, Sabas acknowledged, bowing once more. Suna made his way calmly to the master bedroom on the second floor, ready to rest before continuing his journey. After a few hours of rest, it was time for Tsuna and Sabas to begin their journey to Shizuoka. They were swiftly driven in the same car that had picked them up from the airport, making their way through the roads towards their destination. The scenic drive took approximately 2.5 hours before they finally arrived. Pulling up to a traditional Japanese house adorned with ornate decorations befitting the esteemed Kazama family, they were warmly welcomed by two elderly individuals with radiant smiles. These were Tsuna's grandparents. Stepping out of the car, Tsuna was immediately embraced by his grandmother, who lovingly exclaimed, "Oh, my dear grandson, you've grown so much. Have you eaten yet?" Grinning in response, Tsuna affectionately replied, "Not yet, Grandma." "Well then, let's go inside. We have prepared a feast for you," Tsunayoshi, the other elder, Tsuna's grandfather, joyfully announced, his face beaming with happiness. "Thank you, Grandpa." Tsuna expressed his gratitude as they walked inside, engaging in lively conversation along the way. But as they say, time flies when you're having fun. Before he knew it, it was time for Tsuna to say goodbye to his grandparents. Tsuna had been staying with his grandparents for a few weeks, enjoying their company and exploring the city. They took him to visit all the famous landmarks and even introduced him to some lesser-known but equally charming spots. It was a delightful experience which was made even better by the delicious local cuisine they treated him to. Reluctantly, he bid them farewell and made his way back to his residence in Tokyo. School was starting the next day, and he needed to prepare for the new chapter in his life. Upon their arrival in Tokyo, the city was already cloaked in the embrace of night. Tsuna wasted no time and headed straight for a quick shower before retiring to bed early. The following day, he awoke with a sense of anticipation and excitement. Middle school was about to begin, and while he had already experienced school life in his previous existence, there was a part of him that longed for the chance to relive those formative years. As he dressed in his school uniform, Sabas calmly knocked on Tsuna's bedroom door, informing him that the car was ready. With his school bag in hand, Tsuna joined Sabas, and they embarked on a swift journey through the bustling city streets. Finally, they arrived at a stately school building, adorned with the words Chiako High in bold, elegant lettering atop the gate. However, the entrance gate was filled with a swarm of students, both new and senior, eagerly promoting their clubs in hopes of recruiting freshmen. Observing the situation, Tsuna coolly directed Sabas, "Just drop me off here, Sabas." Sabas furrowed his brow, understanding that his duty was to escort Tsuna directly to the main building where the school's welcoming ceremony was taking place. "Are you sure that's all right?" "It's completely fine, Sabas. Don't worry," Tsuna reassured him with a light smile. Without waiting for Sabas to respond, he swiftly opened the car door and stepped out. Turning to Sabas, Tsuna expressed his gratitude, saying, "Thank you for bringing me here." Sabas bowed respectfully from inside the car as Tsuna composedly faced the bustling gate. With determination in his eyes, he walked towards the crowd, determined to find the basketball club amidst the chaos. As Tsuna made his way through the bustling crowd, he noticed something peculiar. Unlike the other freshmen who were being approached by eager seniors vying for their attention, no one seemed to be approaching Tsuna. Tsuna shook his head in amusement. Meanwhile, the seniors who were supposed to promote their clubs found themselves perplexed by Tsuna's presence. His demeanor and behavior didn't match that of a typical freshman, leaving them unsure of how to approach him. Ultimately, they decided to hold back, opting not to approach him. You're quite interesting," Tsuna heard a voice behind him, causing him to turn around. There stood a young man with a tan complexion and short navy blue hair. "Do you play basketball?" Tsuna maintained his calm demeanor as he replied, "Yes, I do. How about you?" The young man's face lit up with excitement. "Really? That's awesome. Let's go find the basketball club booth and sign up together." He introduced himself eagerly, saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm Daiki Ayamine. Nice to meet you. I noticed a comment asking about a mass update. It's tough for me to manage a mass update due to ongoing challenges related to my decision to drop out of college. There's a lot going on, with family and college contacts trying to sway my decision. I have to do some paperwork regarding this matter, which adds to my stress. There were certain unfortunate circumstances that led me to this decision to drop out. I don't want to blame the college for this. I believe everything that happened is the consequence of my actions. So, I'm at fault for that matter. And I understand that complaining won't help, so I put away my feelings and take action to survive on my own. You might be asking, why don't you persist? Quitting is for the weak. But, you know, quitting might be a tough decision, but it is also a way for you to win in the long run. Anne Duke's quote from The Power of Knowing When to Walk Away. And staying within the academic system felt stifling. I lacked control over decisions made by those in power, leaving me suffocated. Regaining my balance meant stepping out. So, even though I feel a bit relieved, I'm now facing an uncertain future. And it's been stressing me more, ha ha ha. I'm doing my best to navigate independently, leaving little room for a mass update. I genuinely hope to support myself through my work and eventually provide you all with a mass update. But currently, I lack the capacity to do so. I kindly ask for your patience as I work my way out of this situation. Your understanding means a lot. Chapter 8, Chapter 7, Registering for the Club. Observing Ayamine's enthusiastic demeanor, Tsuna shook his head with a small smile. My name is Tsunayashi Kazama. Do you know where the booth is? Ayamine scratched his head and scanned the area. Spotting a long line of people, he pointed in its direction and turned to Tsuna. That should be the booth. Tioko's basketball club is the most popular, so it's hard to miss. I see, let's head over there, Tsuna calmly responded, walking towards the booth while taking in the surroundings. Ayamine followed closely by his side. Curiosity getting the best of him, Ayamine asked, noticing Tsuna's unfamiliarity with the setting, you're Japanese, right? Why do you behave like an international student? Tsuna replied, although I would occasionally visit Japan, I was actually born and raised in the US. Ayamine's eyes widened in excitement. Whoa, the US? You must have played basketball a lot, right? How about a 1v1 match after this? Understanding the US's prominence in basketball and its international popularity, Ayamine assumed Tsuna must have honed his skills in the sport from the source. Reaching the end of the long line at the basketball club booth, Tsuna shook his head and said, let's register first. By the way, which class are you in? You're right, Ayamine chuckled, scratching the back of his head. He then answered Tsuna's question, I believe I'm in 1C class. C, hi? I'm in 1D class, our classes should be next to each other, Tsuna responded upon hearing about Ayamine's class placement. Ayamine cheerfully suggested, we should go to our classes together after this. Tsuna looked at Ayamine with a hint of confusion but agreed nonetheless. Sure, why not? He found it interesting how Ayamine's cheerful personality in middle school contrasted with his memories of Ayamine's high school days. Geez, Daiki. Why did you leave me alone in the crowd? What would happen if I got lost? A voice complained from behind, causing Tsuna and Ayamine to turn. It was a tired-looking girl with long pink hair that reached her lower back. She walked towards them, panting and pouting, clearly not in a great mood. Satsuki? Oh, my bad, Ayamine responded, his tone lacking sincerity. As the girl was called, Momwa expressed her dissatisfaction with Ayamine's response. She then turned to Tsuna and asked, oh, is he your friend? Oh, right. Satsuki, meet Kazama. Ayamine said, introducing Momwa to Tsuna. He continued, and Kazama, meet Satsuki. She's my childhood friend. Ah, nice to meet you. My name is Satsuki Momwa. Momwa introduced herself with a slight bow. Tsuna nodded in response to Momwa's introduction and confidently introduced himself, saying, my name is Tsunayashi Kazama. Nice to meet you as well. Momwa couldn't help but wonder about Tsuna's attitude. In her experience, it was customary for people to bow to each other when they introduced themselves. She thought to herself, what's with this attitude? That's very rude of him. However, Tsuna was unaware of Momwa's expectations. Even if he were aware, Tsuna firmly believed that bowing was reserved for showing respect to elders and his parents. He simply felt very uncomfortable bowing down to others. For him, it was a matter of personal dignity and pride. He valued treating others with kindness and respect, but he also believed in maintaining his own sense of self-worth. With introductions out of the way, Ayamine's eyes sparkled as he turned to Tsuna and suggested, Kazama, actually, we can leave our registration with Satsuki here. Let's go check out our classroom. No. Why should I? Memoir retorted angrily, disagreeing with Amin's suggestion. Oh? Sure then, why not? Suna agreed, looking at their interaction with a smile. Their dynamic reminded him of how siblings would interact with each other. Don't just agree to it. Memoir protested again, pouting. However, her protests seemed to be ignored as Amin and Suna had already walked away, likely heading to check out their classroom and place their school bags there in preparation for the welcoming ceremony. Hey! Don't ignore me! Memoir shouted, feeling annoyed and helpless. With no choice but to register for them, she braced herself. After a long waiting, she finally reached the booth. However, as she began the registration process, she couldn't quite remember Tsuna's name. Wait, what was his name again? Shirahoshi? No, that's not a guy's name. Mina? Mina Yoshi. Memoir scratched her head furiously, trying to recall Tsuna's name. Yes, Mina Yoshi, it should be Mina Yoshi, Memoir convinced herself, believing she had recalled Tsuna's name perfectly. Suna and Amin walked together to the classroom, engaging in a lively conversation. Amin's passion for basketball was evident as he asked Suna numerous questions about the sport. Suna, although not as enthusiastic, gladly answered his inquiries. Unbeknownst to Suna, Memoir had mistakenly messed up his name, which might cause confusion or complications in the future. Upon entering the classroom, Suna noticed that a few students had already settled in, placing their school bags on their desks and engaging in friendly conversations. As Suna walked in, their chatter gradually subsided, and they turned their attention toward him and greeted him. Good morning. With a polite smile, Suna returned their greeting, good morning. However, sensing Suna's reserved demeanor, they resumed their conversations, seemingly uninterested in engaging with him further. Suna calmly placed his school bag on the front row desk near the window, finding solace in the peaceful view outside. Suddenly, an announcement echoed through the classroom, instructing the freshmen to gather in the auditorium for the welcoming ceremony. Amin burst through the door, full of energy, and called out to Tsuna, Tsuna. Let's go together. Amin, understanding Tsuna's preference for a more informal approach to addressing others, called him by his first name. Tsuna had mentioned that he wasn't accustomed to using honorifics or addressing people by their family names, as he had a more relaxed attitude towards cultural conventions. Daiki? Sure, let's go, Tsuna nodded in agreement, accepting Amin's invitation as they made their way toward the auditorium. As they arrived at the venue, the students were directed to line up in their designated spots according to their respective classes. Tsuna bid farewell to Amin and made his way toward his class's designated spot, joining the other students in the line. The auditorium quickly filled with eager new students, buzzing with anticipation. Once everyone had arrived and lined up, the teacher in charge reported to the headmaster, signaling the start of the welcoming ceremony. The headmaster took the stage and delivered a warm welcome speech, setting a positive and inclusive tone for the new academic year. The speech was followed by an informative presentation from a respected teacher, providing insights into the school's curriculum and various opportunities available to the students. Lastly, it was time for the student council president to address the new students. With confidence and enthusiasm, the student council president delivered an inspiring speech, inviting the freshmen to join the student council and actively contribute to the school community. The speech aimed to instill a sense of belonging and encourage students to embrace their potential at school. Amidst the ongoing ceremony, Suna took a moment to soak in the vibrant atmosphere surrounding him. The auditorium was filled with eager students, their energy palpable as they chatted and exchanged excited glances. Suna couldn't help but smile nostalgically, reflecting on the anticipation and thrill of experiencing school life once more. Chapter 9, Chapter 8, Classmates. After the welcoming ceremony concluded, the students dispersed and made their way back to their respective classrooms. Suna entered his class and walked to his seat. His attention was drawn to a girl who appeared genuinely interested in conversing with a young man sitting at his desk, engrossed in a book. The young man had dark green hair neatly parted to the left, his light green eyes framed by black framed glasses. Suna noticed that his left hand was wrapped in a bandage. On the guy's desk sat a small portable fan, an item that seemed out of place in a school environment, especially considering Tiokohai's elite status and the availability of proper air conditioning in the classrooms. Curiosity piqued, the girl queried, Hey, Midorima, why do you have a fan with you? Shintaro Midorima adjusted his glasses before responding to the girl's persistent questions. His tone lacked interest, hoping to discourage further conversation, but the girl seemed undeterred. "It's my lucky item," Midorima replied, a hint of weariness in his voice. Perplexed, the girl tilted her head and asked, "How did you determine it's your lucky item?" Midorima adjusted his glasses once more, his attention fixed on the girl. "According to the OHASA forecast," he explained. The girl's eyes widened with enthusiasm. "Oh, you listen to OHASA too? I'm a Sagittarius. What's your horoscope?" Her excitement was palpable, thrilled to find someone who shared her interest. However, Midorima's response was still, as usual, completely lacking in interest. He sighed, clearly not as enthusiastic about the conversation as she was. It seemed like he expected this interaction to continue until their homeroom teacher arrived. Sitting at his desk, Tsuna observed the exchange with amusement. This dynamic was entirely new to him, as his past school life memories did not mirror this peculiar interaction. "Come in, Murasakibara." The teacher's voice echoed through the classroom, drawing everyone's attention to the middle-aged man who entered the room. Following closely behind him was a young man with long lavender hair cascading down his back and violet eyes. His imposing stature caught the gaze of every student in the class. "Will you really give me a snack, sensei?" Atsushi Murasakibara asked in a disinterested tone, sounding passive and unengaged. The teacher's expression grew stern as he contemplated how to respond. He finally mustered a reply, "Yeah, just find a seat." Pointing towards an empty seat next to Tsuna, the teacher directed Murasakibara to take that spot. Murasakibara simply nodded and made his way toward the designated seat with a bored expression. Once seated, Murasakibara promptly laid his head on the desk, closed his eyes, and drifted off to sleep. A moment of silence enveloped the classroom as everyone gazed at Murasakibara in disbelief. Even Tsuna, who had some recollection of Murasakibara from his past, was left speechless, shaking his head in mild astonishment. He couldn't help but be fascinated by the variety of personalities and quirks he encountered in his new school environment. Feeling a sense of helplessness, the teacher knew there was little he could do. The school board had informed him of Murasakibara's unique disposition, instructing him to tolerate non-threatening behaviors. After all, Murasakibara was considered a prodigious talent and held a Young Athlete Scholarship Award. Resolving to tackle the situation at hand, the teacher chose to overlook the slumbering Murasakibara and proceeded to the front of the class. With chalk in hand, he began inscribing his name on the board, making his presence known as their homeroom teacher. The teacher delved into the details of the school's fundamental rules, ensuring that the students had a clear understanding of the guidelines they were expected to follow. Additionally, he provided a more comprehensive explanation of the school's facilities and their locations, aiming to minimize any confusion among the students. Although the curriculum had been briefly outlined during the welcoming ceremony, the teacher took the opportunity to elaborate on it, presenting the information in a manner that was more accessible and easier to grasp. In adherence to the school's tradition, representatives from the student council were slated to visit the class later, acting as guides to familiarize the newcomers with the school environment. The teacher emphasized the importance of getting to know one another, encouraging the students to introduce themselves. "All right, now, could you please introduce yourself?" With a pointed finger, the teacher singled out Tsuna, indicating that it was his turn to introduce himself. Being seated at the front row, adjacent to the window, Tsuna stood up in response. "My name is Tsunayoshi Kazama. It's a pleasure to meet all of you." His introduction was concise and unassuming. However, an undeniable aura of dignity and refinement about Tsuna that was reminiscent of someone of great importance left a lasting impression on his classmates. While Tsuna did not conform to the customary bowing gesture during introductions, the students overlooked this deviation and continued the introduction to the next student. Beside the slumbering Murasakibara, all the other students in the class had introduced themselves. The teacher, recognizing the futility of trying to wake him up, took it upon himself to introduce Murasakibara to the class. "All right, I believe we've heard from everyone. And this tall student who is currently catching some Zs is Atsushi Murasakibara. It's important that you all form positive relationships with one another, as our class structure at Tiako remains unchanged throughout the 3 years. You'll be spending a significant amount of time together," the teacher elaborated, emphasizing the significance of their long-lasting classmates. Finishing his address, the teacher bid the classroom farewell, coinciding with the arrival of the student council delegates. Engaging in a brief discussion with the teacher, the delegates stepped forward and introduced themselves to the class. They then invited everyone to join them on a tour of the school. As the tour progressed, a few of Tsuna's classmates initiated conversations with him, curious to learn more about him. They discovered that Tsuna, despite his Japanese heritage, had spent his formative years in the United States. This revelation shed light on his unfamiliarity with certain traditional customs. Chapter 10, Bonus Chapters on Monday. Hey everyone! I hope you're doing well. I wanted to share some exciting news. I'm planning to write more chapters over the weekend and upload them on Monday. My goal is to reach a word count of 15k on the same day. If you're up for it, I'd appreciate your support by giving power stones to potentially make it onto the leaderboards. Also, I'd be really grateful if you could consider leaving a review for the book. I just need 8 more, no, 7 more, so please haha. But of course, no pressure at all. Your choice is important, after all. Asterisk pulling out a gun. So, take your time. If you decide to leave a review, thank you so much. And if not, asterisk racking up the gun. That's perfectly okay, too, laughing face, asterisk pulling it closer to your head. Cheers. Creator's thoughts. Mythost. Oh, we also have a new book cover for the story. Check it out and tell me what you think in the comment. Comment. 1 comment. Vote. 2 left. Chapter 11, Chapter 9, Basketball Club. After a full day of orientation events, including school tours, fun games, and introductory sessions by various clubs, the freshmen were granted an early dismissal from Kuroko High School. As Tsuna exited the classroom, he spotted Aomine waiting for him. Aomine greeted him with a friendly smile and a wave. Hey, Tsuna. Let's head to the basketball club. They're holding tryouts to determine our placement in the team. Tsuna raised an eyebrow in response. Tryouts on the first day? That's quite interesting, he remarked. Aomine beamed with excitement. I know, right? Our school's basketball team is known for its strength. I'm looking forward to playing with skilled players. Are you guys heading to the basketball club? A voice inquired. Just as they were about to continue their conversation, they heard a voice behind them. It was Midorima, holding his school bag in one hand and a fan in the other. Tsuna nodded and extended an invitation. Yes, would you like to join us? Adjusting his glasses, Midorima accepted the offer. Sure. Intrigued, Aomine couldn't help but inquire about the fan. By the way, why did you bring a fan with you, I don't think we've exchanged names yet. Tsuna intervened, introducing Midorima to Aomine. Right, you two haven't been properly introduced. This is Shintaro Midorima, my classmate. And this is Daiki Aomine, from Class C. Midorima nodded in acknowledgement and turned to Aomine to answer his question. This is my lucky item, according to the OHA ASA forecast. Aomine tilted his head, puzzled. Tsuna wasn't surprised by his confusion, considering Aomine's single-minded focus on basketball. Unfazed by the skepticism surrounding his belief in lucky items, Midorima simply walked alongside Tsuna and Aomine as they made their way to the basketball club. As they approached the gym building, the sight before them revealed a bustling scene. Many students had gathered, all vying for a spot in the renowned basketball club. Kuroko High School boasted an elite basketball program with 3 distinct tiers, the first, second, and third strings. The first string comprised the top-tier players representing the club's main team. The captain of the club was always chosen from this talented group. The second string served as reserves for the first string, although they also participated in their own matches. While not at the same level as the first string, they were still skilled players. Unfortunately, the third string seemed to serve as a kind of holding ground for players who did not make it into either the first or second string. Their role in matches remained uncertain, and the third string appeared primarily created to accommodate lower-skilled members. Although players in the third string were encouraged to improve and strive for advancement to the second string, the likelihood of this happening seemed slim. Oh, Daiki, you've arrived. Momoa's voice rang out amidst the crowded space as she jogged toward them, waving her hand with excitement. As she got closer, she noticed Tsuna and Midorima and greeted them warmly. Oh, you're the guy from earlier. Momoa exclaimed, pointing her finger at Tsuna. Tsuna tilted his head in confusion, unsure of what he had done to warrant such a remark. He replied, I'm not sure if I was being rude during our interaction, but if I was, I apologize. Aomine chuckled and interjected, come on, Satsuki. Tsuna was born and raised in the US. He's still getting used to our culture. Hearing Aomine addressed Tsuna by his name, Momwa looked puzzled and playfully tilted her head. Tsuna. Tsuna, sensing something was amiss, asked, I thought I introduced myself before. Is something wrong? Momwa giggled awkwardly and explained, oh, yes. Tsunayashi, right? Since Daki called you by your first name, I'll do the same. So, feel free to call me Satsuki, hehe. At that moment, Momwa realized that she may have made a mistake with Tsuna's registration form, miswriting his name. However, there was nothing she could do at this point. Just then, a senior with short black hair and light grey eyes, who seemed to be in charge of the tryouts, instructed everyone to line up. He announced that they would be calling out names and assigning them to their respective groups. All right, my name is Shizo Nijimura, and I'm the captain of the Chieko Basketball Club, Nijimura announced, taking charge of the tryouts. As you may already know, we'll be conducting a quick tryout to determine your placement in our team. I'll be calling out your names by group, and once your name is called, report to the senior in charge of your group. Let's get started. Momwa watched the scene unfold with a helpless expression, observing Tsuna as he patiently waited. Nijimura proceeded to call out more names, one after another, until finally. Jin Tanaka and Minayoshi Kazama. Those are all the names participating in the tryout today. Tsuna felt a sense of confusion when his name was called last, and he noticed that his name had been mispronounced. He approached Nijimura, seeking clarification. Excuse me, there seems to be a problem with my name. Did you just call Tsunayashi? Nijimura, slightly puzzled, pointed to the list and replied, no, the name on the list is Minayoshi. Are you Minayoshi? Understanding the reason behind Momwa's earlier confusion, Tsuna ignored Nijimura's question and asked another in return. What happens if there's an error in the registration? Nijimura paused for a moment, recalling a similar incident from the previous year. Well, in such cases, the person was not allowed to participate and had to register again the following year. Tsuna simply nodded, taking in the information. He then turned his attention to Momwa, who looked pale and guilty. Unable to meet his gaze, she turned away and whistled nervously. Observing Momwa's behavior, Tsuna shook his head lightly, understanding her reaction as that of a child caught in the act of wrongdoing. His mind quickly worked to find a solution to rectify the situation. So, you're Minayoshi? Nijimura asked cautiously, sensing something unusual in Tsuna's demeanor. Despite the mix-up with his name on the list, Tsuna maintained his calm expression. He met Nijimura's gaze directly and replied in a nonchalant tone after taking a long pause as he decided, yes, I am. Where should I go? Who is the senior in charge of my group? Nijimura, observing Tsuna's composed demeanor, concluded that Tsuna was not playing any tricks. He nodded and responded, I'm in charge of your group. Please line up behind me and wait for the others. Although Tsuna appeared nonchalant on the surface, one could see a glimpse of emptiness in his eyes if one looked closely. Chapter 12, Chapter 10, Tryout. Each student went through the various fundamental skill checks as the tryout continued. Layup shots, normal shots, three-pointers, dribbling, and defense were all assessed to gauge their abilities. Evidently, some participants struggled with their fundamentals and were promptly placed in the third string. Although it was disheartening for them, their skills simply did not meet the desired level. On the other hand, those who displayed extraordinary fundamentals were given the opportunity to engage in 1v1 matches against the senior overseeing their group. This group included the soon-to-be Generation Miracles. Winning these matches was not a requirement, as the coach did not expect freshmen to prevail in such challenging matchups. However, there were a few exceptions. Aomine's agility allowed him to bypass his opponent, showcasing his skills effortlessly. Midorima's exceptional shooting prowess impressed the onlookers. Akashi's remarkable dribbling abilities and tactical acumen were on full display. And Murasakibara's towering height and strength proved to be advantageous. As the tryout drew to a close, all eyes were on Tsuna. A sense of anticipation filled the air, particularly from Aomine, eager to witness the skills Tsuna had honed during his time in the United States. Knowing that Tsuna's opponent was none other than Nijimura, considered to be Chieko's best player, added to the anticipation of the match. The two players faced off on the three-point line, ready for action. Freshman, you take offense, and I'll defend, Nijimura stated as he skillfully dribbled the ball from side to side. All right, Tsuna responded with a calm demeanor, sizing up his opponent. Without hesitation, Nijimura passed the ball to Tsuna, adjusted his stance, and prepared to defend. As Tsuna caught the ball, a transformation seemed to occur. Even Nijimura, standing before him, felt the shift in energy and narrowed his eyes. Akin and the others also sensed the sudden change in the atmosphere, causing Akin to wear a wide grin, excited at the prospect of facing off against Tsuna in the future. Nijimura had already noticed Tsuna's exceptional skills during the earlier stages of the tryout. His solid fundamentals were a rarity among freshmen. However, he underestimated Tsuna's abilities. Observing Tsuna standing before him, Nijimura silently acknowledged his mistake. It seems I shouldn't have underestimated this freshman. Tsuna began to dribble the ball, his movements were fluid and quick. As he advanced, Nijimura attempted to impede his progress. Tsuna gazed at Nijimura, who was defending him, and a slight smile graced his face. Suddenly, his dribbling speed escalated from ordinary to astonishingly fast. Tsuna's lightning-quick dribbling left Nijimura astonished. His eyes struggled to keep up with the ball. What on earth? Akashi, observing from the sidelines, showed a hint of surprise. Midorima adjusted his glasses, focusing intently on the 1v1 match. Even Murasakibara, who typically lacked interest, watched attentively as he munched on a snack given to him by his homeroom teacher. Seizing the opportunity presented by Nijimura's astonishment, Tsuna swiftly maneuvered past Nijimura's left side. However, Nijimura, as the captain of the first string, was not to be underestimated. Witnessing Tsuna's move, Nijimura reacted quickly, attempting to impede Tsuna's progress. But just as Nijimura believed he had followed Tsuna successfully, Tsuna swiftly changed direction, crossing over to the right side in an instant. This caught Nijimura off guard, leaving him unable to respond. It wasn't a matter of being unprepared. Nijimura couldn't even react to Tsuna's lightning speed. Too fast. It's beyond the capabilities of a middle school student. Nijimura thought, his eyes widening in disbelief. With Nijimura bypassed, Tsuna flawlessly executed a layup shot, securing his victory in the first game. Tsuna, with a sense of confidence, believed that his impressive performance would secure his place in the first string. He gazed at the bewildered Nijimura, contemplating the outcome. Nijimura, still in a state of surprise, acknowledged Tsuna's skill and found himself intrigued by the freshman's abilities. He turned to face Tsunayashi, who remained composed while holding the ball. Witnessing Tsuna's nonchalant expression, Nijimura felt a surge of excitement, considering it a challenge to play against such a talented player. However, their interaction was interrupted as the door swung open, and assistant coach Sanada entered the room. Nijimura muttered in surprise, recognizing the presence of assistant coach Sanada during their tryout. Sanada approached them, questioning Nijimura about the progress of the tryout. Nijimura, have you completed the tryout? We're running out of time, Sanada inquired, closing the distance between them. Nijimura paused for a moment, contemplating the situation. While he wished to continue playing against Tsuna, the time constraints demanded immediate resolution. Yes, we're done, Nijimura responded, a tinge of disappointment in his voice. Although he regretted the limited opportunity to engage further with a skilled player like Tsuna, they needed to conclude the tryout promptly. Here's the report for today's tryout, Nijimura gestured to a senior member of the first string, who handed the report to assistant coach Sanada. Examining the report in his hand, Sanada adjusted his glasses, his eyebrows raising in surprise. The report exceeded his expectations, revealing a number of talented players among the freshmen. All right, as we have been instructed to conclude club activities soon, I will now announce the new additions to our team, Sanada addressed the freshmen, his voice carrying authority. Those of you who participated in the 1v1 matches will be placed in the second string. However, there are exceptions this time, as a select few will be placed in the first string, Sanada continued, opening the report file in his hand and preparing to call out the names. What? Does that even possible? This should be the first time ever, no. As Sanada mentioned it, the room buzzed with murmurs of surprise and disbelief. The idea of freshmen being placed directly into the first string was unheard of at Tiako Basketball Club. The room fell into silence as Sanada announced the names, Daiki Akin, Seijuro Akashi, Shintaro Midorima, Atsushi Murasakibara, and Mina Yoshi Kazama. Gasps echoed through the room as everyone turned their attention to those that were called. The disbelief in their eyes matched the surprise in their murmurs. It was a rare occurrence for a freshman to join the first string immediately. Tiako's basketball history had never seen such an exception before. Tsuna's expression turned somber upon hearing his name. His initial excitement about joining the club now seemed overshadowed by a lingering problem. Deep in thought, Tsuna contemplated the need to speak with the coach later. His gaze shifted towards Momoi, who struggled to contain her amusement, covering her mouth to stifle her laughter. Tsuna acknowledged his calm demeanor, considering his own capabilities and standings. However, this new development tested his mental resilience, stirring a hint of frustration within him. Yet, after a moment of reflection, Tsuna let out an exhausted sigh, realizing that becoming upset would not resolve the situation. "We warmly welcome you to the club. Remember to work hard and be ever victorious," Sanada concluded his speech, emphasizing the club's motto and core beliefs. Chapter 13, Chapter 11, Appointment. Would you all prefer if I use the Japanese honorifics to make it more like the anime, or should I stick to using names without honorifics? Just let me know by commenting. After the intense tryout, the students headed home. Some felt a tinge of jealousy towards those who made it to the first string, but it also fueled their determination to train harder. Tsuna also didn't forget to bring up the issue of his name to Nijimura before heading home. It was easily resolved as they hadn't submitted the final list to the school administration. As Tsuna stepped out of the gym, Amine approached him with a cheerful proposal. "Hey, wanna have a 1v1 right now?" Before Tsuna could respond, Momoi intervened, playfully jabbing Amine's stomach. "Not now, silly," she scolded him. Amine protested, "Why?" "It's just not the right time," Momoi explained, crossing her arms. Then, she turned to Tsuna, offering a sincere bow of apology. "I'm sorry, Minayoshi." But Tsuna playfully flicked her forehead in response, making her exclaim, "Ouch!" "Why?" He had almost let it slide, thinking it was an innocent mistake, but her continued teasing revealed her true intentions. "Stop making fun of me," Tsuna said, shaking his head with a smile, and they all walked together toward the school gate. Tsuna smiled at Amine. "Let's have our 1v1 tomorrow instead. I have a meeting tonight." "A meeting? What's that?" Amine asked, looking puzzled. He wasn't familiar with such adult-like responsibilities, muttering, "Sounds like something grown ups do." Having a meeting would be unusual for normal teenagers, but Tsuna came from a wealthy family with business interests in Japan. His father had tasked him with assisting in managing some of their affairs here. Tsuna didn't mind, as it gave him valuable insights into their Japanese operations. As they reached the school gate, a crowd had gathered around a foreigner dressed as a butler. "Wow! Daiki, look over there!" Momoi exclaimed, pointing at the butler. Amine was equally amazed, saying, "Is that a real-life butler? I've never seen one before." Tsuna walked towards the car where the foreign butler was waiting, unfazed by the crowd's attention. "Tsunayoshi, where are you going?" Momoi couldn't contain her surprise, asking Tsuna where he was going. She was astonished to see the butler open the car door for him. "Tsuna, are you a rich kid?" Amine was taken aback and wondered if Tsuna came from a wealthy family. With a calm demeanor, Tsuna calmly told them both farewells. "As you can see, my ride is here. See you both tomorrow." He waved goodbye to Momoi and Satsuki, leaving them in shock. As Tsuna entered the car, the butler, Sabas, closed the door gently and took the driver's seat. As the car drove away, the onlookers continued to murmur, intrigued by the sights of Tsuna welcomed by the butler they'd been talking about. "I had no idea Tsuna came from such a wealthy background," Amine commented, surprised by the revelation. While Tiako High School was filled with elite students, Tsuna's level of affluence seemed exceptional even among them. Amine and Momoi also came from well-off families, but Tsuna's status appeared to be on a whole different level. That is obvious, especially knowing his family name. Just then, they were interrupted by another student with spiky red-maroon hair and striking eyes with vertical pupils. It was Chijuro Akashi, who was one of the few freshmen who had been placed in the first string. Momoi recognized Akashi, saying, "Hey, you're Chijuro Akashi, right? What do you mean by that?" Akashi merely smiled and closed his eyes before answering, "Let's just say that his family is part of a prominent international conglomerate. They are widely renowned." "Hey, really?" Amine's curiosity was piqued, but his straightforward nature quickly brushed it off, focusing on Tsuna's basketball skills instead. "Well, it doesn't matter anyway. What does matter is he loves basketball as much as I do." As they continued their conversation, another luxurious car pulled up, opening the door for Akashi. This unexpected sight left Aomine and Momoi even more astonished. "Nice to meet you both," Akashi bid farewell as he entered the car. "Seriously, how many kids from conglomerates are here in our school?" Momoi whispered to herself, still amazed by the revelation. The next day, Tsuna went to school after attending a gathering of influential families and business leaders in Japan. He was a bit surprised to find that no others his age were at the event. After some inquiries, he learned there was a separate gathering called Summer Gathering for the younger generation, typically including those between 14 and 19 years old. Although it was an unusual experience, Tsuna didn't let it bother him much. He had grown accustomed to such gatherings due to his family's status, where many people sought his attention. Some approached with good intentions, while others had ulterior motives, trying to leverage his family's influence. Handling these situations came easily to Tsuna, and he left a positive impression on the people he interacted with. The gathering allowed him to meet and get to know various important figures in Japan. Among the attendees, one person stood out to Tsuna, Jiro Akashi, whom he recognized as Akashi's father. Despite the flattery and business talk that filled the event, Tsuna found Jiro Akashi's approach to be quite different. Akashi's father treated Tsuna like an elder, greeting a younger family member, which struck a chord with Tsuna. It helped him understand the strict upbringing Akashi had received, as his father seemed to be a man of pride and traditional values. "You seem to be in a good mood, young master," Sabas, the butler, remarked, glancing at Tsuna through the rear-view mirror. "I am," Tsuna replied calmly. As they neared the school gate, he requested, "Sabas, could you drop me off a bit further away from the gate? I'll walk the rest of the way." Sabas looked concerned and hesitated. "That may not be wise, young master. Just drop me there. I don't want to attract too much attention like yesterday," Tsuna insisted, closing his eyes to indicate his decision was final. With a sigh, Sabas finally agreed, knowing that Tsuna was resolute in his choice. "Understood." As they reached the school, Tsuna met up with Momoi on the way, and they walked together to their class building. The lessons for the day were uneventful, and Tsuna quietly read an advanced book for college students while the classes went on. When the final school bell rang, signaling the end of classes, Tsuna joined Midorima and Murasakibara as they headed to the gym building. They were making their way to the basketball club practice. On the way, they were greeted by a fellow student, who was the son of someone who had left a strong impression on Tsuna during the gathering the night before. Chapter 14, Chapter 12, Seijuro Akashi. As Tsuna looked at the student before him, he noticed that the guy's presence was quite different from that of his father during the gathering the night before. Nonetheless, considering his age, Tsuna found his accomplishments quite impressive. Meanwhile, Akashi observed Tsuna with interest, finding a unique and powerful aura around him, similar to that of his father. He understood why his father had a high opinion of Tsuna, the youngest heir of the renowned Kazama family. "Tsunayashi Kazama." Akashi paused for a moment before extending his hand for a handshake. "I've heard about you from my father. A pleasure to meet you. I'm Seijuro Akashi." Tsuna nodded and firmly shook Akashi's hand. "Seijuro, hey? Your father mentioned you quite a few times yesterday." Using Akashi's first name was Tsuna's way of distinguishing between the father and son, so it wouldn't be confusing to refer to both of them as Akashi. As the three of them walked together towards the basketball club, Midorima couldn't help but feel a bit out of place. He observed Tsuna and Akashi exchanging pleasantries. It felt like witnessing a meeting between royalty. The air around them seemed to carry a sense of prestige and power, something he was not accustomed to. Deep in thought, Midorima held a dumbbell in his hand, which he considered his lucky item for the day. "This feels quite heavy, but I suppose it's fitting for a gathering of conglomerate heirs. After all, they're like real-life princes," he mused to himself. After the greeting, they continued walking together in silence. The atmosphere felt a bit tense, making Momoi uncomfortable. Trying to break the silence, she said, "I guess we'll all go to the club together then." Her words brought some relief to the atmosphere as they headed towards the basketball club as a group. Upon reaching the basketball club, Tsuna noticed many familiar faces who had arrived earlier. Aomine, one of them, was currently dribbling the ball while Nijimura defended against him. Observing Aomine, Tsuna mumbled to himself, "I thought Daiki would be the type to arrive late." Momoi chuckled at his remark, causing Tsuna to turn to her. She replied, "Daiki might be late for other things, but when it comes to basketball, he's always on time. He's that passionate about it? Suna inquired, glancing at Ayamine's excited expression while playing against Nijimura. Momoa nodded with a gentle smile as she looked at Ayamine. Daiki doesn't just like basketball. He loves it. She remarked. Suna found it quite amusing how Ayamine's current attitude contrasted with what he remembered from his past life. However, his attention was drawn to Sanada, who entered the court with an older man by his side. The man had short, combed-back grey hair and a well-kept circle beard. He was dressed formally in a dark business suit with a white shirt and a green tie. His sharp eyes were narrowed as he observed the soon-to-be generation miracles. Seeing Sanada arrive with the man, Nijimura stopped playing and walked up to them, offering a friendly greeting. After some simple pleasantries, Nijimura stood up in the middle of the court and instructed all the first-string members to line up in front of them. Sanada nodded in agreement as he observed everyone lining up. Standing beside him, a man with a warm smile stepped forward to introduce himself. I see new faces among you, so I shall introduce myself first. My name is Kozo Shirogane, and I'm currently the head coach of the Chiako Basketball Club. As usual, we'll start with some simple exercises for the first training day. However, because I heard we have a great addition to the team, we will do a practice game. Shirogana's charismatic speech captured the attention of the members. He gestured towards Sanada. As for how the team was divided, I'll let assistant coach Sanada and captain Nijimura decide it. After concluding his speech, Shirogane excused himself, hinting at other duties to attend to. Sanada took over the proceedings and decided to pit the newcomers against the senior players for a practice game. The exercises continued for longer than Tsuna had expected, and he noticed that the training was quite intense for what was considered a simple exercise. The first-string players were panting, and some were drenched in sweat. As Tsuna participated in the shuttle runs with the rest of the group, he observed something incredible. Murasakibara, the towering player with a laid-back demeanor, seemed unfazed by the demanding exercises. He appeared to be effortlessly completing the drills, not breaking a sweat or showing any signs of tiredness. Tsuna couldn't help but ask, "Are you not tired at all, Atsushi?" "Hey? Not at all. This is a light exercise, right?" Murasakibara nonchalantly replied when someone called out to him. "You asked him such a question, but you don't seem tired either," Midorime interrupted while panting as he looked at Tsuna, who seemed to be doing fine after such exercises. "Well, while that is indeed the case, I'm used to something harder than this," Tsuna explained while still doing the exercise with Midorime following him from behind. "However, that guy," Tsuna continued as he pointed at Murasakibara, who seemed lost in thought again as he kept doing the exercise before them. "I doubt he was used to this kind of exercise before." Hearing this, Midorime widened his eyes in disbelief. "So, you're saying that it's just his natural physique?" Akashi, who was listening to this, also widened his eyes in surprise as he looked at Murasakibara in a new light. To think that they had such a monster on their team. "That's true," Tsuna agreed, nodding his head as he continued doing the exercise. He couldn't help but keep his eyes on Murasakibara, who appeared to be lost in thought, almost like he was on autopilot. "But, I guess it comes with a cost, hey?" As Tsuna observed, he couldn't help but think that with the right coach or professional trainer, Murasakibara had the potential to rival those NBA players just based on his remarkable physique. The sheer size and natural talent of Murasakibara left Tsuna in awe, imagining the incredible heights he could reach in basketball with proper guidance. "It's getting interesting," Tsuna muttered silently as he smiled. Chapter 15, Chapter 13, Monsters. After completing the set of exercises, assistant coach Sanada made the decision to split the team into two groups based on the players' year in school. 5 new additions had been promoted to the first string, and Sanada was eager to witness the new talents in action against the regular players. A substitute player from the first string took on the role of the referee, positioning himself at the center of the court. He held the basketball in his hands, poised to toss it into the air for the jump ball. Both teams had selected their tallest players to contest the jump ball. Murasakibara stood at the center for the first-year team, while an unfamiliar player from the senior players' team, who matched Murasakibara's height, faced off against him. Ayamine's wide grin radiated his intense enthusiasm. The upcoming game stirred his excitement, and he couldn't help but revel in it. Despite being just a practice match, the prospect of facing opponents who were seasoned regulars in a team considered a strong contender on the national stage thrilled him. Amidst the charged atmosphere, Tsuna turned to Ayamine, a smile curving his lips. His own excitement matched that of his teammate. The practice game was an opportunity to gauge the skills of their opponents, a prospect that had Tsuna's anticipation bubbling. Curious about Amin's thoughts, Tsuna inquired, looking forward to it. Amin's grin remained, and he replied with unwavering excitement, absolutely. I've heard there are no pushovers. Indeed, Midorima chimed in, his own demeanor reflective of anticipation. Adjusting his glasses with meticulous precision, he added, they have consistently held a top 3 position in the national ranking. Their skill is beyond doubt. Engaging in this pre-game chatter, the anticipation continued to build. Amidst the exchanges, the seniors who had taken on the role of referees signaled for the teams to get ready, indicating that the moment of action was drawing near. The referee then lofted the ball into the air, and both Murasakibara and his opponent leaped to reach it. With a well-timed hit, Murasakibara managed to direct the ball towards Akashi, his first-year teammate. Swiftly reacting, all the first-year players surged forward, positioning themselves closer to the opposing team's court. However, Murasakibara's approach was more leisurely, he simply strolled back and stationed himself within the first-year team's defensive zone, his focus on blocking the enemy's offensive maneuvers. Akashi began to dribble the basketball, making his way down the court. However, Nijimura swiftly positioned himself before Akashi, intent on preventing him from progressing further. The senior players marked each of the first-year players, leaving no room for gaps in their defense. Observing Nijimura's solid defense, Akashi's mind whirled. He pondered how Tsuna managed to bypass him so effortlessly before. In a snap, Amin located the perfect opening, prompting Akashi to pass the ball to him. With a smirk, Amin deftly dribbled the ball toward the hoop, his speed and skill allowing him to navigate through the defenders with finesse. Just as Amin prepared to execute a layup shot, a young man with short, spiky blonde hair and piercing blue eyes leaped in, expertly blocking the ball. You won't get away with that, freshman. The young man declared, surprising Amin. Meanwhile, Tsuna moved into position to guard one of the senior players. As the ball was passed to Nijimura, the dynamics shifted. Now in control of the ball, the senior players pressed forward. Nijimura engaged in dribbling, surprising even Akashi with his speed. He's faster than I expected. Advancing toward the opposing hoop, Nijimura propelled himself with purpose. Tsuna dashed forward to intercept his progress. But then, Nijimura abruptly shifted his stance into a shooting posture, catching Tsuna off guard. Swiftly releasing the ball, Nijimura's shot soared through the air, leaving Tsuna with little time to respond. That was a swift change of tactics. I can't afford to underestimate them, Tsuna mused, his gaze fixed on the hoop as the ball sailed through the net seamlessly. Even Murasakibara was taken aback, unable to block the shot in time. Pass me the ball, Seijuro, Tsuna called out to Akashi, who was in possession of the ball. Taking hold of the ball, Tsuna's demeanor shifted, his intensity heightening as he recognized the challenge before him. Here he comes, Nijimura thought, rallying his teammates to defend against Tsuna's impending move. Tsuna dribbled the ball as he pressed forward, threading his way through the defense with remarkable ease. However, as he neared Nijimura, he adjusted his approach, sensing a change in Nijimura's stance. Much like the previous day, Tsuna altered his dribble speed, attempting to breach Nijimura's defense from the left side. Yet, Nijimura's reflexes were quick, his body shifting in tandem with Tsuna's movements. Anticipating Tsuna's crossover to the right, Nijimura moved to intercept. But to his surprise, Tsuna smoothly passed the ball to Midorima without even turning his body. Caught off guard, Nijimura's eyes widened as he saw Tsuna's triumphant smile. Got me, he grumbled inwardly. With the ball now in Midorima's possession, he launched a shot toward the hoop. The ball arched through the air with exceptional height, leaving Nijimura and the others gazing upward. I've got my lucky item with me today, Midorima announced, strolling back towards the defensive lineup. His gaze flicked towards the bench where a potted plant sat, and he continued confidently, there's no way I'll miss. Nijimura and his teammates exchanged incredulous glances. Sinking a three-point shot with that high arc was already impressive, but turning away before the ball even swished through the net exuded an air of extreme confidence. Actually, it was more than that, it was sheer self-assuredness. As he retreated to his position, Midorima couldn't help but notice that Tsuna, who had delivered the precise pass, was already striding back ahead of him. Midorima stole a glance at Tsuna's back, a mix of surprise and admiration in his eyes. Did he have that much faith in my shot? The question echoed in Midorima's mind, prompting him to re-evaluate his initial impression of Tsuna. It was becoming increasingly apparent that someone bearing that surname wouldn't settle for mediocrity. "Well done, Shintaro," Akashi interjected, his tone measured. "It's to be expected," Midorima responded, adjusting his glasses. While his exterior appeared composed, anyone astute enough could detect a subtle upturn of his lips, a sign of his hidden satisfaction. Across the court, Sanada's eyes were locked on the unfolding action, a small smile playing at his lips. "I'm confident we'll clinch this year's tournament, coach," he murmured, his tone oozing assurance. He quickly corrected himself, "Actually, we'll definitely win." Meanwhile, on the court, Amine's grin was practically ear to ear. He relished the challenge of facing formidable opponents. The adversaries weren't just on the other side, his fellow teammates were also a force to be reckoned with. Tsuna, in particular, caught his attention with a playing style that bore striking similarities to his own. "I can't wait to go all out against him," Amine mused inwardly. As the game progressed, Nijimura couldn't help but acknowledge that their opponent's defense was as robust as their offense. His frustration mounted as he watched the score tip increasingly in the opponent's favor, while their side remained stagnant. In a flash, Tsuna snatched the ball and sent it flying towards Amine. Seizing the ball firmly, Amine dribbled forward with a menacing intent. Predictably, he danced through the defense with effortless finesse. However, Nijimura boldly stepped in, aiming to thwart Amine's advance. Just as he thought he had a chance to steal the ball, Amine executed a swift sidestep, launching the ball at the hoop with an air of casual nonchalance. "What the?" Sekigakai's incredulous exclamation echoed through the court. Monstrous skill levels. It might be understandable if there were just one or two exceptional players, but this. Chapter 16, Chapter 14, 1v1 with Amine. The point gap continued to widen, and both the senior and freshman teams struggled to catch their breath. The intensity and fervor of the match had reached unprecedented heights. In the midst of the high-paced game, Tsuna keenly assessed the situation. He recognized that his energy wasn't boundless, the opponent's robust defense required him to expend extra stamina. Even Murasakibara, with his formidable physique, was audibly panting. This indicated the challenging nature of the opponent's offensive strategies. Sekigakai gained possession of the ball and embarked on a drive towards the basket. However, his trajectory was abruptly disrupted by Midorima's adept defense. Reacting swiftly, Sekigakai managed to salvage the situation by passing the ball to Nijimura. Internal alarm bells rang for Sekigakai as he shot a quick glance towards the freshman team. The sight of their performance was enough to give anyone pause. Dribbling the ball, Nijimura hunted for a weak point in the defensive wall. Akashi, displaying his own prowess, endeavored to intercept Nijimura's progress. At the critical moment, when Akashi made a move to snatch the ball, Nijimura exhibited exceptional control, tightly securing the ball and evading Akashi's defense. With steadfast determination, Nijimura closed in on the hoop for a layup shot. Yet, just as he was poised mid-air for the crucial throw, Murasakibara sprang into action, attempting to block Nijimura's shot. Anticipating this defensive maneuver, Nijimura instinctively altered his airborne posture, seamlessly diverting his attention from a shot attempt to an expertly executed pass. The recipient of his calculated pass was a young man with long, obsidian hair that obscured his eyes and partially veiled his ears, Masaya Kubota. Kubota's swift reflexes translated into a rapid release of the ball, which sailed towards the backboard with precision, sinking into the net in a flawless bank shot. "They're very good," Midorima, while adjusting his glasses, couldn't help but acknowledge the exceptional skill displayed by the opposing team. Thoughts of their proficiency flickered through his mind. "I'm hungry." On a different wavelength, Murasakibara's mental musings diverged greatly. His thoughts danced around a rather unrelated topic: snacks. His mind's tangential path would likely astonish the seniors if they had any inkling of his whimsical contemplation during such a crucial match. Unbeknownst to the seniors, had they been privy to Murasakibara's thoughts, their collective frustration might have found audible expression in vehement expletives directed at him. Emboldened by Kubota's successful contribution, the senior players rallied, channeling their efforts both in defense and attack with unyielding determination. This shift in momentum put pressure on the freshman team, including Tsuna, who felt the sudden swell of intensified competition. After an intense period of play, the sharp blast of the referee's whistle resonated across the court, its high pitch cutting through the charged atmosphere. All eyes converged on the scoreboard, where the final score was displayed, 71-78. The seniors claimed 71 points while the freshmen secured a total of 78 points. That was insane, Nijimura mumbled, still catching his breath as he rested on the court. The game had taken a considerable toll on his stamina. What struck him even more was the remarkable skill displayed by the new players. The addition to their team was undeniably of top-tier quality. Assistant coach Sanada, despite his initial surprise, wore a persistent smile. The unfolding events had pleasantly caught him off guard. This year, their prospects for clinching the championship looked promising. Meanwhile, Suna took a moment to rehydrate with a water bottle handed to him by Mamois. He was undeniably fatigued, yet not to an incapacitating extent. His time training with Alex in the US had exposed him to even more demanding regimes. Thus, while today's training had been grueling, he managed it with accustomed resilience. Amin, approaching Tsuna, mirrored his fatigue-quenching action by raising a water bottle to his lips. He struck up a conversation, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. "How's it going?" Tsuna met Amin's gaze, acknowledging the approach with a nod. "Hanging in there," he replied. The exhaustion was present, but not overwhelming. Then came Amin's wide grin, an embodiment of his characteristic enthusiasm. "How about a one-on-one, Tsuna?" he proposed. A sense of eagerness illuminated Amin's expression, his enthusiasm for a one-on-one match palpable. Sekigakai's weary voice punctuated the moment as he sprawled on the ground, drained by the exertion of the game. "You guys aren't tired at all?" he chimed in, expressing his exhaustion. Tsuna checked the time, realizing that they still had a bit before the training facility closed for the day. With a grin, he responded, "Sure, why not?" Meanwhile, Sekigakai felt quite miserable as he muttered, "Did I just get ignored?" And so, the stage was set. Tsuna found himself in a court face-off against Amin. The dynamic shifted, with Amin now on the offense and Tsuna tasked with defense. The rest of the players watched attentively from the sidelines, their curiosity piqued to witness this showdown and determine who had the upper hand. "Let's do this," Tsuna challenged, his voice directed towards the grinning Amin. Without a word in response, Amin lunged forward, his movements swiftly met by Tsuna's defensive stance. The basketball was bounced to the left by Amin, yet Tsuna anticipated the action with precision, shifting his body to effectively obstruct Amin's progress. The flawless defense left Amin halted in his tracks, confronted by Tsuna's impenetrable guard. Not even a sliver of an opening was visible. Tsuna's remarkable reaction speed fascinated Amin, who found himself growing even more thrilled by the challenge. His smirk expanded across his face, radiating his excitement. "I can't predict the outcome," Sekigakai mused aloud. "You're correct, their reaction times are incredibly balanced." "It's a tough call," Akashi responded, his insight capturing the attention of those around him. "Akashi's right, however, one thing for sure, Tsuna's fundamental skills seem to surpass all of ours," Nijimura added, interjecting into the conversation. Mamoi's gaze shifted between Amin and Tsuna, her expression reflecting her deep concern for the unfolding match. Back on the court, Amin's nimble movements saw him dribbling the ball behind his back, deftly transitioning to his right side as he surged forward, attempting to breach Tsuna's defense. The velocity at which he moved left those watching utterly astonished. But in the midst of his rapid maneuver, Amin abruptly encountered an astonishing reality. "What?" A bewildered glance was cast towards Tsuna, who seemed nonchalantly engaged in dribbling the ball. Every observer present was equally flabbergasted. The manner in which Tsuna had snatched the ball away remained elusive to their eyes. "This is insane," Nijimura murmured to himself, his words audible to those nearby. "Captain, can you explain what just happened?" Midorima inquired, his visage a canvas of disbelief. The occurrence was nearly a blur, but it appears Tsuna managed to pilfer the ball just before Amin initiated his dribble from behind. There's a fleeting moment, when a player starts dribbling from their rear, during which the ball is momentarily vulnerable to theft, either from their left or right side based on their intended direction. Given Amin's speed, seizing that opportunity is nearly impossible. Even Amin found himself taken aback, yet an undercurrent of exhilaration coursed through him. "He's surpassing my expectations by a long shot," he silently acknowledged, an almost childlike grin tugging at his lips, akin to a youngster reuniting with a long-lost toy. "All right, I'll take offense now, correct?" Tsuna inquired, his tone dripping with indifference. Chapter 17, Chapter 15, Ankle Break and a Ghost? Amin's response was a mere grin. Dispensing with any formal reply, he swiftly transitioned into a defensive stance. In the heat of the moment, Suna acknowledged his good fortune. Almost faltering in his attempt to swipe the ball, Amin's swiftness outpaced his expectations. And his primal instincts are still dormant. I can't help but wonder if I'd be able to steal the ball from him if his instinct did awaken. As his eyes remained affixed on Amin's vigilant defense, Suna acknowledged his prior underestimation of the generation of miracles. In short order, he began a leisurely dribble, gradually closing the distance between himself and Amin. However, in a split second, his pace transformed, the ball dancing between his hands, passing beneath his legs, and darting behind him in a dizzying display, a tactic aimed at bewildering Amin. The maneuver proved spectacularly effective. His dribbling's even faster than when he faced me. Nijimura burst out, an unmistakable mixture of surprise and awe etched onto his features. A sentiment shared by the entire onlooking assembly. Amin was left stunned. He reacted instinctively as his eyes following the blur of the ball as Suna executed a swift move. However, Suna changed direction abruptly, catching Amin off guard. Caught off balance, Amin stumbled and fell to the court. Suna's grin widened as he tossed the ball towards the hoop without even looking. The shot was flawless, and the ball sailed through the net. Whoa, what just happened? Sekigakai blurted out, clearly confused. That's what's called an ankle break, Midorima explained, adjusting his glasses. Ankle break? Akashi chimed in, it's a basketball move where a player changes direction so suddenly that it trips up the defender. That's correct, Nijimura added, his surprise evident. He hadn't realized Suna's skill level was this high. Even Murasakibara put down his snacks, his attention fully on Suna in amazement. Let's play some more, Suna. Amin's enthusiastic voice cut through the air, his spirit undaunted even after his fall. It was a remarkable display of someone defeated, yet still eager to keep playing. I'm not sure if we have enough time, Suna murmured, his gaze flicking to the clock on the wall a little distance away from the court. After a moment's consideration, he nodded, a small decision forming. But yet, let's squeeze in a couple more. Amin's face lit up with enthusiasm. Haha, let's do it. The two players quickly engaged in 2 more rounds of one-on-one. The outcomes of these games left everyone who was watching astonished. Amin, the skilled player he was, found himself soundly defeated. Regardless of the tactics he tried, Suna effortlessly countered each move, while Amin struggled to do the same. Suna's techniques were simply unbeatable. As they packed up, ready to head home, Suna glanced at the disheartened Amin and gave a sympathetic shake of his head. He understood that Amin's frustration didn't stem from losing but rather from the fact that their playtime had to come to an end. Once he left the court, Suna informed Sabas that he intended to head home alone. Despite Sabas' resistance, Suna's decision stood firm, and Sabas reluctantly conceded. As Suna made his way toward the gate, he noticed that the nearby court was still illuminated, its lights casting a glow on the surroundings. It didn't take a leap of logic for Suna to figure out who might be there. Guess I'll check it out, he murmured to himself. Approaching the unused court, Suna noticed Midorima also heading in the same direction. Their curiosity seemed to align. You're curious too? Suna inquired as they reached the entrance. Midorima nodded in agreement. The two of them entered the court area. To their surprise, there was no one there. Just moments earlier, they had distinctly heard the sound of a basketball being dribbled, yet now, there was an eerie silence, and no sign of anyone around. Am I hearing things? Midorima mumbled, adjusting his glasses in an awkward gesture. No, you're not, Tsunayoshi assured him upon catching Midorima's muttering. That can't be right. There's nobody here, Midorima insisted, his glasses receiving another adjustment. Tsunayoshi couldn't help but notice Midorima's growing unease, evident in his perspiring forehead. Are you afraid of ghosts, Shintaro? No, I don't believe in such nonsense, Midorima denied, yet Tsunayoshi could see the anxiety in Midorima's increasing sweat. It was a side of Midorima that Tsunayoshi hadn't expected to witness. Hey, this is quite amusing. Actually, there really is someone here, Tsunayoshi stated with a serious undertone. Midorima hastily adjusted his glasses once more, his complexion turning paler. He interpreted Tsunayoshi's words as a reference to a potential ghost sighting. Little did he know that Tsunayoshi was merely describing a student with light blue hair neatly combed to one side. The student's blue eyes had a vacant expression, and his relatively fair skin gave him a somewhat ghostly appearance. He was Tetsuya Kuroko. As the door creaked open, Kuroko momentarily halted his training, casting a curious gaze toward the entrance. His attention was caught by the sight of two students entering, one with black hair and the other with dark green hair. That's Tsunayoshi Kazama and Shintaro Midorima from the first string, he noted mentally, watching them enter. However, his surprise was palpable when Tsuna's gaze locked onto his own. It was rare for anyone to notice him, given his near-invisible presence directly. Wait, he can see me. Midorima, can't you see the light blue-haired student over there? Tsunayoshi addressed Midorima, gesturing discreetly toward Kuroko. A mix of bewilderment and unease washed over Midorima as he turned to Tsunayoshi, his throat audibly working as he swallowed hard. Seriously, I'm not joking right now. Tsuna seemed momentarily at a loss for words, his surprise causing him to switch to English unintentionally. Convinced of Tsuna's sincerity, Midorima finally turned his attention in the direction indicated by Tsuna's pointing finger. Initially, it seemed like there was no one there. Midorima was about to chide Tsuna for pulling a prank on him, but then his vision focused on a figure, the light blue-haired student who stood on the court, basketball in hand. Midorima's eyes widened in astonishment. He's nearly invisible. Midorima shifted his gaze to Tsuna, ready to question him about this unexpected sight. Yet, before he could utter a word, Tsuna was already heading toward the mysterious student. Hey there, what are you up to? Tsuna inquired, feigning curiosity. Training, Kazama-kun, the light blue-haired student replied in a calm tone that matched his expression. Oh, do you know me? Now, it was Tsuna's turn to be genuinely taken aback. You're well known, Kazama-kun, especially after your victory against Najimura-senpai, came the reply from the light blue-haired student, his demeanor so impassive that it hardly conveyed the weight of his words. Is that so? Observing Tsuna's stunned reaction, Midorima's lips curled slightly, clearly savoring the moment. Ahem, by the way, what's your name again? Tsuna redirected the conversation. I am Tetsuya Kuroko. Pleased to make your acquaintance, the light blue-haired student introduced himself calmly as he bowed in classic Japanese introduction. Tsunayoshi nodded in acknowledgement before responding, although you seem to have recognized me, I suppose I should properly introduce myself, too. I'm Tsunayoshi Kazama. It's a pleasure to meet you. And this guy here is Shintaro Midorima-kun. I'm aware of him. Every single one of you that got admitted to the first string is also quite renowned, Kuroko interjected, stopping Tsuna's introduction in its tracks, while Midorima nonchalantly shrugged his shoulders. Right, Tsuna's lips twitched slightly at how stiff this conversation was as he continued, anyway, the school facilities were about to be locked, wanna come and hang out with us? Chapter 18, Chapter 16, Thugs? Following their previous encounter, the trio decided to grab a bite at a nearby fast food joint. Midorima ended up tagging along. Tsuna opted for a Big Macs, Kuroko chose a vanilla shake, and Midorima ordered a vegetarian Egg Macs muffin. As Tsuna munched on his burger, he turned his attention to Kuroko and inquired, Hey Tetsuya, what made you train so late? Your dedication is impressive. Taking a moment to respond, Kuroko answered, Well, I'm not exactly blessed with natural talent in basketball. So, hard work is my way of trying to get better. Kuroko's response elicited a nod from Tsuna, who had previously informed Kuroko he preferred not to use last names outside of formal occasions. I see, Tsuna replied thoughtfully, recognizing Kuroko's commitment. Meanwhile, Midorima maintained a quiet demeanor, watching the exchange. Tsuna's next statement, however, was direct, almost blunt, You know, Tetsuya, you may not be physically strong and your fundamentals might be lacking. Kuroko cast his eyes downward at Tsuna's frank assessment, and Midorima seemed taken aback by Tsuna's straightforwardness. It was not within their culture to speak so bluntly like this. He was well aware Tsuna was speaking the truth, but the words still stung a bit. But your training approach could use some adjustment. While you can build technical finesse that capitalizes on your low presence, remember that strong basics are the foundation. While Tsuna respected Kuroko's hard work, he believed that refining fundamental skills was crucial before delving too deeply into technical aspects. He understood that a strong physical foundation was essential for any athlete's success. As Tsuna continued to explain his points, Kuroko's eyes widened with surprise. While his words were a bit painful to hear, Kuroko couldn't deny the truth in them. He couldn't argue with the facts Tsuna was laying out. Then, a sudden realization hit him. Tsuna's critique had sparked an idea in his mind. Could his low presence, which had always been seen as a disadvantage, actually be turned into a weapon? The thought of dribbling the ball undetected by opponents ignited a spark of excitement within him. Swiftly downing the rest of his shake, Kuroko stood up, his decision made. He bid his farewell to Tsuna and Midorima. "Thank you for the insight, Kazama-kun," Kuroko expressed his gratitude before leaving the two behind. As Kuroko departed, Tsunayoshi pondered, "Did I come off too strong?" If Tsuna had known that his words had triggered Kuroko's unconventional idea, he might have been left quite speechless. That wasn't exactly what he intended to convey. Meanwhile, Midorima looked at Tsunayoshi and commented wryly, "Even though your critique wasn't directed at me, it was still pretty intense." He shook his head slightly while adjusting his glasses, his focus quickly returning to his meal. Kuroko's epiphany hadn't particularly concerned Midorima, who was more engrossed in his food. "Yeah, maybe I came on a bit too strong," Tsuna admitted after a brief silence. Midorima, focused on his food, didn't respond verbally. He agreed with Tsuna's sentiment, though. What Tsuna had told Kuroko was intended for Kuroko's improvement. Tsuna offered valuable advice. If Kuroko couldn't take it well, it was on him. He's actually giving out a favor to help others with their skills, Midorima thought, mildly impressed by Tsuna's willingness to share his insights. Midorima's gaze shifted to Tsuna, who seemed to relish his burger with unusual intensity. He couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you accustomed to eating burgers in the US?" Tsuna's expression softened as he smiled in reminiscence. "No, not really. My family was very strict about my diet, so I never really had any." The memories of his past life overlapped with this one. Even before, Tsuna rarely indulged in fast food due to its unhealthiness, and he had the luxury of having a personal nutritionist and dietary expert, as he also trained very hard in martial arts. "Interesting," Midorima commented. After Kuroko left, Tsuna and Midorima conversed for a while longer. Eventually, they parted ways, heading home in different directions. Walking leisurely down the street, Tsuna gazed up at the sky, relishing the simple pleasure of a carefree stroll. A gentle smile graced his lips, showing his contentment. However, a frantic cry from a nearby alley abruptly shattered the peaceful ambience. "Help! No, stop!" Tsuna's expression turned serious as he turned his attention towards the alley. "Should I call the police?" he mused aloud, although he doubted that dialing 911 would be the most effective course of action here. Trusting in the relatively safe environment of Japan, Tsuna quickened his pace and headed towards the source of the distress. As he approached the alley, Tsuna caught sight of a familiar pink-haired girl. She appeared to be cornered by a group of teenagers who seemed to be high school students. Without hesitation, Tsuna closed the distance between himself and the group, his concern for the girl outweighing any fear of potential danger. One of the teenagers seemed uncertain and questioned the leader, "Are you sure about this?" Hearing this, the leader scoffed, "What's the big deal? There are no security cameras here. And you've messed around with random girls before, right? But most of the other times, they were drunk. This girl isn't." Another teenager gave the hesitant one a slap on the back, chiming in, "Come on, does it really matter?" As this unsettling conversation played out, Mamoa, who had been listening, was utterly terrified. Overwhelmed by fear, tears rose in her eyes, and she felt helpless. "I thought Japan was supposed to be safe. I guess I was wrong." Suddenly, an unexpected voice broke through the tension. Everyone turned to see Tsuna walking up to them nonchalantly. Recognizing the voice, Mamoa shifted her gaze to Tsuna and immediately rushed to him, seeking comfort in his embrace. Tsuna held her tightly as she cried, comforting her during this distressing time. Given her age, this kind of experience was undoubtedly traumatic for her. "Should we just get out of here?" one of the teenagers, who had been uncertain earlier, proposed. The group's supposed leader shrugged and turned, appearing ready to leave the scene. However, Tsuna was not about to let them off the hook so easily. "You think you can just walk away now that I'm here?" The leader stopped in his tracks upon hearing this challenge. He turned back to face Tsuna, a mixture of surprise and annoyance on his face. "What did you say?" "Ego can be a dangerous thing," Tsuna muttered in English to himself before switching back to Japanese. "I said you need my permission to leave." If the guy's ego hadn't been so easily provoked, Tsuna might not have been able to intervene. Given Mamoa's ongoing distress and vulnerability, leaving her in this state could severely affect her mental well-being. Unfortunately for the guy, his ego had put him in a difficult situation. Satsuki, stay behind me, Suna instructed Momoa, who was still sobbing. Momoa vigorously shook her head, attempting to dissuade Suna from taking any rash actions. However, Suna reassured her through his actions, gesturing that she should trust him. Don't worry too much. They're just troublemakers. I need to put them in their place. Filled with doubt, Momoa could only stand helplessly behind Suna. She watched his back, which appeared broader and more resolute than ever, as he approached the group. Chapter 19, Chapter 17, KO. The group's leader sneered in response, saying, "You've got quite the nerve to believe you can handle me on your own. I'm not just dealing with you. I'm dealing with all of you," Suna replied, calmly clarifying his intentions. Laughter erupted from one of the teens who had previously slapped his companion on the back. His laughter rang out as if he had heard the most amusing joke. "Kid, you've got guts. You could at least show some respect for your senior. You're just a middle school student." Although they were high school students and Suna was still in middle school, the difference in their heights wasn't that significant as Suna was notably tall for his age. Suna's smile persisted as he retorted, "They say wisdom comes with age, but it looks like it missed you. You asked for this, you fucker." Hearing this, one of the teenagers lost his temper and charged at Suna. Suna swiftly assumed a boxing stance, ready to defend himself. The group's leader merely laughed in amusement at Suna's stance, taunting, "Knowing a bit of boxing won't save you in a street fight." His taunts were abruptly halted as his friend lunged at Suna, throwing a punch on Suna's face. Suna seamlessly dodged the punch as he slid in, moving closer, and immediately retaliated with a hook punch to the teenager's face. The force of Suna's punch sent the teen tumbling to the ground, unconscious. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?" Suna turned to face the group's leader, a touch of mockery in his tone. "You little..." The leader's words were cut short as he charged towards Suna. Observing this, Suna couldn't help but smirk. He smoothly transitioned into a fighting stance, poised to respond. As the leader unleashed a flurry of punches, Suna effortlessly evaded each one, much to the leader's growing frustration. "Is dodging all you've got?" the leader taunted. Suna shook his head slightly at the leader's attempt to provoke him. Suna then quickly moved, lunging forward with a jab aimed at the leader's face. However, the leader deftly sidestepped, evading the blow. In the brief pause that followed, the leader seemed ready to mock Suna for his failed punch. But before any words escaped his lips, his eyes widened in astonishment. He barely had time to react as Suna smoothly shifted to the left, following up with another punch directly to the leader's face. The impact left the leader momentarily stunned. Stumbling backward, the leader fought to regain his bearings after the forceful punch that disoriented him. Suna wasn't easing up, though. He swiftly followed up with an uppercut to the leader's chin, sending the leader crashing into a nearby trash can. Silence settled in the alley as the leader remained motionless, clearly knocked out by Suna's powerful blows. The only one left standing was a trembling teen, fear evident in his every movement. "Can I just go?" The teen's voice quivered as he addressed Suna. He seemed to recognize the stark reality that Suna would easily overpower him if he dared to fight. "Do you think I would let you go if you were in my shoes?" Suna regarded the teen with a direct gaze, genuinely curious about the teen's question. The air was tense with the unspoken understanding that escape wasn't likely. "I guess not." The teen heaved a sigh, understanding the inevitability of the situation. The silence was broken by another sound, a thud that marked the fall of yet another unconscious body in the alley. Observing the scene in the alley, Suna sighed inwardly, shaking his head. His attention shifted back to Momoa, who had rushed to his side, seeking solace in his embrace. "Are you okay?" Suna's concern was genuine, but he realized the obviousness of his question as Momoa clung to him, unable to reply. He chuckled softly at his own question. "Right, I guess that was a silly thing to ask." Now faced with the issue of the troublemakers in front of him, Suna pondered his options. He took note of the area's lack of security measures, with no visible CCTV cameras around. Calling the police might not yield results without evidence. Using his family's influence crossed his mind, but he dismissed it. It would trigger alerts back in the US and wasn't the best approach. Dialing a number on his phone, Suna called Sabas, explaining the situation briefly and requesting his assistance. He also made a specific request. With a gentle motion, he disengaged from Momoa's embrace. "Wait here for a moment. I'll take care of this." Are you planning to kill them? Satsuki's voice was shaky, still recovering from the ordeal. No. Suna paused, taken aback by her question. His thoughts chimed in, that's a pretty chilling thought. But honestly, if I were her, I might feel the same. He spotted a coil of rope tucked in a corner and decided to use it. Carefully, he arranged the troublemakers in a circle and secured them with the rope. As Tsuna bound them, Momoi inquired, "Are you going to call the police?" Tsuna sighed, "I wish I could, but it's hard to keep them detained without evidence. I have a plan to give them a taste of their own medicine, though." Shortly after, Sabas arrived with a large container of water. Tsuna motioned for Momoi to join them and get into the car. "Sabas, pour the water on them," Tsuna instructed, his voice calm. "Of course," Sabas responded with a nod, carrying the container into the alley where the teenagers were held. Observing the state of the teenagers, Sabas understood that they would probably remain unconscious throughout the night. Dousing them with water would likely lead to them falling ill, and considering how long it would take for them to be discovered or free themselves from the rope, they were in for a difficult time. Sabas remarked in a casual tone, "A tiger cub is still a tiger, it seems." He alluded to Tsuna's firm handling of the situation, implying that even someone seemingly gentle could assert their strength when needed. Chapter 20, Chapter 18, Revenge? After dropping Momoi off at her house, Tsuna said his goodbyes. He had taken a moment to explain a few things about Momoi's situation to her parents, which had left them deeply concerned and grateful for his help. Leaving Momoi's place and heading home, Tsuna's gaze remained fixed on the passing scenery outside the window. His mind seemed to be preoccupied with his own thoughts. The following day, Tsuna resumed his routine and returned to school. Approaching his classroom, Tsuna encountered Aamine, who was positioned near the door, apparently waiting for him to arrive. Aamine seemed a bit uneasy as he started the conversation, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "Hey, I heard about what happened last night. Thanks for that. I don't know what would have happened to her if you weren't there." Tsuna responded with a question as he calmly looked at Aamine without stopping his step. "Did you know she was looking for you?" Aamine visibly flinched, his guilt apparent. "Yeah, I figured." The previous day, after their practice and Aamine's repeated losses to Tsuna in one-on-one matches, Aamine had been fired up. He had stayed out late, practicing on an empty public court. However, Momoi, concerned for him and unaware of his late-night training, had searched for him after he didn't come home. Tsuna's response was composed, and he walked past Aamine, giving some advice. "It's okay if you understand. Just make sure you tell her beforehand next time. No need to stress her out." Tsuna continued, adding, "Class is starting, so head back to your room." As soon as those words left his mouth, the school bell chimed, signaling the beginning of the class. Students gathered in the hallway, entering the classroom for the upcoming lessons. "Yeah, catch you later," Aamine responded, glancing at the clock on the wall before saying goodbye and heading off. When the lesson kicked off, Tsuna engaged in listening for a while. However, realizing he was familiar with the subject, he pulled out an advanced book that wasn't typical for middle school and began studying at his own pace. Before he knew it, the school day had come to an end. Although a training session was scheduled, Tsuna had already informed Nijimura about his absence due to a family matter. Stepping out through the school gate, Tsuna's attention was drawn to the group of teens he had confronted and subdued the previous night. Their discomfort was evident, some even shaking with unease. It appeared that the gift Tsuna had given them had likely resulted in their current state of sickness. Upon seeing Tsuna approach, the group leader displayed a mixed expression of surprise, excitement, hostility, and perhaps even relief. However, it was clear that his condition was the worst among the trio. "It looks like you guys didn't grasp the lesson, hey?" Tsuna immediately addressed them, not giving them a chance to respond. His tone was casual as if he was used to dealing with such situations. "I suppose my little gift didn't make much of an impact. You son of a bit." The curses of one of the teens trailing the leader were cut short as the leader raised his hand, signaling him to stop. "Do you have the guts to follow us?" The leader shot at Tsuna, his gaze ablaze with hostility. His eyes locked onto Tsuna's, who met the intensity with an almost expressionless look. Aware of the curious glances cast their way by onlookers, Tsuna scanned the surroundings briefly. His response was concise. "Yeah, sure." However, checking his wristwatch, Tsuna continued, his tone carrying authority. "You've got 30 minutes. The group fell into a tense silence at Tsuna's assertive words. Another was physically restraining one of the teenagers who had previously hurled curses at him, the anger in his eyes evident. This fucker! Let me go, I'll go fuck this guy. Ignoring one of his friends throwing a tantrum, the leader began striding away, seemingly ignoring Tsuna's directive. Tsuna's decision to follow them prompted a smirk from the leader, who muttered under his breath as he walked. Cocky brat, you're going to regret crossing us. Tsuna remained unfazed by the threat. Instead, he found the situation rather amusing. After all, seeking revenge against someone who had so quickly defeated them was questionable unless they had backup. Continuing down the path, they eventually reached an empty park, its quietness contrasting with the bustling streets behind. In the park, Tsuna noticed a group of people around the same age as the teen thugs, each adorned with various distinct appearances. Some were shirtless, a few sported chain necklaces and others had brightly dyed hair. They seemed like characters from a TV portrayal of typical street thugs in Japan. Upon realizing that the leader was leading him into this gathering, Tsuna's steps faltered. He found himself surrounded by these individuals. The leader's expression turned sour, and he taunted Tsuna with a mockingly downturned lip. Scared, are you? While aware of the disadvantageous position he had willingly put himself in, Tsuna remained outwardly composed. He gazed at the group calmly, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. Ego really can be a dangerous thing, he murmured softly to himself, his words laced with a hint of self-reflection. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. Inwardly, Tsuna understood the risk of his decision. Yet, his ego and pride prevented him from retreating like a coward. What's your problem, hey? Speak up, punk. The other teenager reacted with another burst of curses, his frustration clearly evident. The rest of the group displayed puzzled expressions, struggling to grasp the meaning of the English words Tsuna had quietly uttered. Tsuna diverted his attention momentarily to check his wristwatch once more. His demeanor remained composed as he spoke again. Time's ticking. You've got 20 minutes left now. Upon hearing Tsuna's words, the teen, who seemed to possess a short fuse, could no longer contain his anger. He abruptly charged toward Tsuna, his face contorted with rage as he bellowed, "You fucker, I'm gonna kill you." Chapter 21, Chapter 19, Awakening. As the furious teenager charged towards him, Tsuna adopted a casual yet focused fighting stance. Swiftly, he sidestepped to his left, neatly evading the incoming punch aimed at him. Seizing the opening, Tsuna responded by launching a quick jab, connecting with the teen's face. A pained groan escaped the teen as the jab hit its mark. Before he could recover, Tsuna capitalized on the moment, delivering another powerful punch that utilized his entire body's strength. The force of Tsuna's punch sent the teenager tumbling to the ground, his attempts at retaliation thwarted. The scene turned quiet, the other thugs observing in stunned silence. Among them, a blonde-haired individual approached the leader of the group. With a hint of begrudging admiration, he commented, "Well, it seems he knows how to handle himself." "I warned you that trying to take him on one-on-one was a bad idea," the leader stated matter-of-factly, his gaze fixed on Tsuna, who remained composed. They completely ignored the guy who got KO'd by Tsuna. The blonde thug responded with a dismissive laugh, disregarding the leader's words. He signaled to his comrades to encircle Tsuna. "Nah, that's just bullshit. But you know what, fighting as a group is our expertise." Tsuna's observations quickly showed that the thugs were brandishing blunt objects as makeshift weapons. Noticing the weapons as well, the leader's expression turned sour. The other teen, still feeling the effects of Tsuna's gift from last night, grew anxious. He addressed the leader, "This wasn't the plan." "We agreed, no weapons, just fists." With an audible sigh, the blonde thug displayed his irritation. He spoke, clearly unhappy with the situation, "You asked for our help, but we help in our own way. Understand?" "You got it, boss." "Haha." The thugs responded in agreement, their laughter echoing around them. Evidently, they were accustomed to this sort of scenario, their excitement evident at the prospect of using weapons against Tsuna. The blonde thug signaled for his comrades to quiet down, ending their laughter. He looked at Tsuna, who remained remarkably composed despite the circumstances. "You've got guts for not backing down. I'll give you that." He began clapping his hands in mocking applause, a gesture to acknowledge Tsuna's courage. "But let's be real, do you honestly believe you can take us all on?" Tsuna didn't rush to respond. Instead, he carefully scanned his surroundings, noting that the thugs lacked any knives or other lethal weapons. His attention returned to the blonde thug. "At least you guys don't have anything that can finish me off instantly," Suna replied calmly, almost as if the blunt weapons posed no threat. While blunt objects could indeed cause harm, Suna's combat training had taught him how to minimize the impact of such hits. He knew he couldn't afford to hold back in this perilous situation. "I might slip up today," Suna mumbled to himself, thinking that he couldn't afford to hold back the way he fought as he prepared to re-engage. He shifted into a fighting stance again and continued, "But it's oddly nostalgic. When it's a matter of life or death, all that matters is efficiency, right?" Suna's calm demeanor and words clearly annoyed the blonde thug. His ego stung. As Suna settled into his fighting stance once more, the thug raised his hand, signaling his crew to go after Suna all at once. He commanded, "Take him down." The thugs charged at Suna in a collective rush. Even the leader of the three and the last teen who hesitated before also ran in, their faces contorted with cruel anticipation. They were relishing the prospect of pummeling Suna to a pulp. The first thug, wielding a bat, approached with a triumphant grin. He swung the bat towards Suna, who skillfully evaded the blow by stepping back. But Suna's counterattack didn't end there. He closed the distance swiftly, striking the thug's wrist to force him to release the bat. With deft precision, Suna swiftly kicked the thug in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. Sensing another attacker coming from a different angle, Suna acted without hesitation. He grabbed the dropped bat and sidestepped, avoiding the incoming attack. In a swift and calculated motion, he swung the bat at the thug's face, the impact rendering the thug unconscious. The sight of Suna using the bat and employing such ruthless tactics caught the other thugs off guard. They froze in their tracks, clearly taken aback by Suna's unexpected fierceness. "What? You think I only know how to fight the conventional way?" Suna retorted, a hint of challenge in his tone, as he toyed with the bat in his hand. "You fucker!" The blonde thug's anger surged as he lunged forward, gripping his own weapon tightly. The rest of the thugs followed suit, closing in on Suna from all sides. The brawl raged on. It was a whirlwind of chaos. Suna held his ground, skillfully taking down one thug after another. Yet, the sheer number of attackers made it a daunting task. Suna couldn't evade every strike, evident from the bruises forming on his hands and feet, which he used to parry the blunt weapons. Amidst the chaos, Suna realized another issue cropping up: his still developing body struggled to execute his fighting experience flawlessly. His discomfort was becoming evident. "Shit," Suna muttered, comprehending that his youthful physique was becoming a hindrance. The blonde thug also caught onto Suna's weariness, prompting him to signal his crew to intensify their assault. Darting to avoid inevitable blows and absorbing others, Suna's thoughts were a mix of determination and exhaustion. "Am I reaching my breaking point?" Glancing at the relentless thugs, who persisted despite their fallen comrades littering the ground, Suna was resolute about imprinting their faces in his memory so he could take his revenge later if he lost this. However, "No, I can't give up now. There's no way these thugs can defeat me," Suna muttered, his resolve unwavering as he continued to fend off attacks. As fatigue began to creep in, Suna's will to persist and emerge victorious intensified. His heartbeat quickened, spurred on by the refusal to yield, even as he sensed he was nearing his physical limits. With a surge of adrenaline coursing through him, Suna's heartbeat thundered in his ears. Instinctively, his eyes snapped shut and then reopened, and suddenly, everything around him took on a reddish tint, as if the world itself had become a pulsating heartbeat. Time seemed to stretch and slow from his perspective. In this surreal moment, his mind cleared, frustrations evaporated, and Suna found himself in a state of utmost clarity. The thugs who had been fixing their gaze on Suna now looked as if they'd seen a ghost, their faces draining of color. But even this didn't halt their advance, they continued their assault. In this instant, Suna felt he had transcended his current limitations, breaking through a barrier. With this newfound sensation, a broad grin split his face, akin to a child who had just unwrapped a long-awaited toy. Suna felt light as air, his movements fluid and precise as he dispatched each thug individually. To the onlookers, it was a blur of action. Before they could comprehend, their companions were sprawled on the ground. Suna exploited this momentary advantage, deftly closing in on the remaining attackers and rendering them unconscious with single, well-placed strikes. In a matter of moments, the entire group lay defeated on the ground, unconscious. Only the blonde thug remained, his face edged with horror. As Suna turned his gaze toward him, the thug's fear peaked, and a yellowish liquid began to stain his pants before he slumped to the ground in an unconscious heap. "You're a demon," the blonde thug murmured in a voice barely above a whisper, his eyes wild with terror. Then, with a sudden burst of fear-driven energy, he scrambled to his feet and fled, his screams echoing in the distance, resembling the cries of a terrified child. Suna just stood there as he silently looked at the blonde thug who ran away. Chapter 22, Chapter 20, title at the end. As the strange distortion of reality faded away, Suna was left reeling from a sudden wave of pain that surged throughout his body. He let out a low, pained groan, his body clearly feeling the toll of the intense battle. He carefully moved to a nearby tree in the quiet park. Slowly, he lowered himself to a sitting position, leaning against the sturdy trunk for support. Despite his victory, his body was battered and bruised, and he could feel exhaustion. Retrieving his phone, he saw that its screen was cracked in places, but it seemed to be functioning. He dialed a number and waited, the beeping tone ringing in his ears. Finally, the call connected, and Saba's voice came through the line, "Do you require any assistance, young master?" Suna's frown deepened as he assessed his condition. "Yeah, I won't be able to make it to the meeting today," he replied, his voice tinged with discomfort. He was fully aware that he had pushed himself to the brink. Aware of his limitations, Suna continued, "Can you pick me up at the park near XX Street?" "Of course, I'll be there shortly," Sabas responded promptly. With that assurance, Suna ended the call, his vision growing hazy. He could feel his energy draining rapidly, and darkness began to creep at the edges of his vision. As his body succumbed to the fatigue, everything went black, and he slipped unconscious. Soon after Tsuna's collapse, Sabas arrived on the scene, a mix of concern and alarm evident on his face. He hurried over to where Tsuna lay, taking in the unsettling sight before him. He muttered under his breath, "What on earth?" The park appeared almost surreal in its emptiness, starkly contrasting the unconscious bodies scattered around. Bloodstains marred the ground, and Tsuna's still form leaned against a tree, the weariness on his face telling its own story. Sabas moved with a sense of urgency, crouching down to examine Tsuna's condition. Seeing the blood and Tsuna's visible injuries painted a clearer picture for him. He noticed the broken state of Tsuna's arms and feet, indicating the severity of the battle he had fought. With a careful yet efficient touch, Sabas carefully lifted Tsuna's body, cradling him in his arms. The urgency was evident in every movement as he quickly carried Tsuna to the waiting car. Once Tsuna was safely settled, Sabas took the driver's seat and sped toward the nearest Kazama family hospital, determined to get his young master the medical attention he urgently needed. In Tsuna's conscious state, he found himself engulfed in a strange sensation as if he were caught in the midst of powerful currents that left him with no control. It was a suffocating experience that left him struggling against forces beyond his influence. This sensation. Oddly enough, this feeling of helplessness wasn't entirely unfamiliar to him. It echoed moments when his efforts hadn't yielded the results he desired, instances when circumstances were beyond his grasp, and he was left with no choice but to accept them as they were. This feeling. I can't stand it. A twilight quest destined for those with the courage to conquer. Amid this surreal mental state, a voice resonated, cutting through the confusion. The surroundings transformed instantly, placing Tsuna in an ancient, otherworldly setting. Stairs led up to a regal throne, upon which sat a man with an air of ease. As his heart raced, Tsuna felt an inexplicable compulsion to ascend those steps, drawing him toward the throne. The urgency in his chest propelled him forward, and with each step, he moved closer to the enigmatic figure seated atop the throne. A mysterious threshold guarded by challenges only the conquering can surmount. Approaching the throne step by step, Tsuna felt his heart race almost audibly. The beats thudded in his ears, a reminder of his presence in this enigmatic place. Reaching the summit of the stairs, his gaze was drawn to a figure seated before him, only the eyes visible in the dim light. The eyes were unlike any he had encountered before, a piercing crimson shade radiating an overwhelming sense of authority and power. Through the labyrinth of adversity, I emerge. Yet, a conflicting sentiment gnawed at him. These eyes, why do they feel so familiar? Tsuna questioned, his curiosity mingled with an odd sense of recognition. Instantly, a brilliant light burst forth, illuminating the figure's features. A voice resonating from the depths of his being accompanied this revelation. As the Conqueror. And to his astonishment, the shadowy figure took form, revealing none other than himself. It was a disconcerting realization, confronting his own likeness in this surreal realm. His voice barely audible, Tsuna couldn't help but remark, those eyes. The vacant throne seemed to beckon to him, and he hesitated only briefly before moving towards it. Seated upon it, a newfound sense of command and authority surged through him, and his eyes now gleamed with a vibrant crimson hue. From this regal vantage point, he gazed down at the dream world before him, his voice resonating with conviction. I dub thee, the Conqueror's eyes. I always thought you were ahead of your brother at your age, a voice he recognized echoed. Suna's consciousness returned to the real world. As his eyes slowly opened, the room came into view. His body was swathed in bandages, and beside him, his father, Hiratora, sat in a chair, engrossed in a book. But I see you're not as grown up as I thought. Suna tried to push aside his embarrassment from earlier by focusing on the question at hand. Why are you here, father? He inquired, attempting to regain his composure. He glanced around to confirm his surroundings before posing another question. And why are we in our private jet? Where are we headed? Hiratora set his book aside, his gaze gentle as he regarded his son. He explained, you've been unconscious for 2 days. Your mother and I were concerned, so we brought you back to the US. Suna's eyebrows furrowed in genuine surprise. He had lingering aspirations back in Japan, and the prospect of abruptly leaving was disconcerting. What about my school? You still want to go back after all that? Hiratora lifted an eyebrow in apparent bewilderment. He couldn't fathom why his son would still desire to stay in Japan after enduring such an ordeal. Do you think the US is safer than Japan? They have guns in the US, Suna stated matter-of-factly. He continued, and I have something that I have yet to achieve in Japan. Hiratora's frown deepened. But observing the determination in his son's eyes, a sense of familiarity washed over him, reminding him of his own past. He sighed, conceding, I'll give you 1 year, but you need to convince your mother first. All right. It would be a challenge, but Suna was resolute in his decision. Title: The Conqueror's Eyes. Chapter 23, Chapter 21, Street Ball Court. Great then, I shall take my leave, Hiratora announced, rising from his seat with the intention of giving Suna some space. However, before he could exit the room, Suna's voice reached him, Father, what about those people? Hiratora halted in his steps, turning to face his son, who met his gaze steadily. He understood that Suna was inquiring about the thugs he had encountered in Japan. Out of the 11, only 2 might fully recover. Hiratora disclosed the grim reality, waiting calmly for Tsuna's reaction. I see. Deep down, Suna was relieved. At least there were no fatalities. He nodded with a sense of acceptance, having anticipated such outcomes. After all, he hadn't held back in his response to their aggression, opting to target vital areas. The mere fact that none of them had died was something of a mercy. Do you feel sorry for them? Those thugs, though misguided, were still young, with their whole lives ahead of them. Being left in a vegetative state, trapped in an existence devoid of real living, seemed even more merciless than death itself. Hearing the question, Suna fell into a contemplative silence, his gaze fixed on the scene outside the private jet's window. He spoke calmly, No, I just did what I had to do to survive. Hiratora acknowledged his son's response with a slow nod. He understood that sentiment while the world often demanded harsh choices for survival. Hiratora was keenly aware that had Suna reacted differently, it could have easily been him tucked within the sterile embrace of a hospital bed, fighting for his life. While Hiratora might have expected Suna to feel remorse over his actions, given his young age, he felt a certain contentment in Tsuna's pragmatic understanding of the harsh realities at play. Observing Tsuna's distant stare out the window, Hiratora's lips curled into a faint smile. He turned to leave the room, giving Suna space to contemplate. Suna was enveloped in his mother's anxious inquiries upon returning to the US. The worry etched on her face tugged at his heart, sparking a sense of guilt. The doctors were relieved to find that Suna's injuries, despite the intense fight he had been through, were relatively minor. To their surprise, he had managed to evade any significant harm, which garnered their amazement. The medical team responsible for his well-being expressed their gratitude that Suna's crucial body parts had escaped harm. While the doctors acknowledged Suna's lack of formal combat training, they attributed his relatively unscathed condition to sheer luck. They believed that chance had played a significant role in his favorable outcome. Unbeknownst to them, Suna had effectively translated his skills from his previous life into his present circumstances. This enabled him to deftly dodge critical attacks and absorb others using his limbs, explaining the fractures he had endured. The medical professionals predicted a recovery period of around 4 to 5 weeks for his fractures based on his condition. And as predicted, 4 weeks had passed since the altercation, and Tsuna now sat beside Alexandra in a car. Alexandra had suggested taking Tsuna to a streetball court in the city, a spot known for enjoying a more unconventional style of basketball. She had been a regular at this place, having been introduced to it by her friends some time ago. "When will you go back to Japan?" Alexandra asked Tsuna about his return plans to Japan in between the casual ambience. Tsuna, engrossed in a book, looked up at her as she spoke. "I had to attend my brother's wedding before returning, so I will return next week." Tsuna closed the book, giving her his attention. "That's great then." Alexandra's face lit up upon hearing this. She was pleased with the prospect of having Tsuna join them for a streetball game in the upcoming game. This meant they could enjoy playing together for the duration of the week. Alexandra kept up the conversation, asking Tsuna about Japan, whether he enjoyed it, how the basketball scene compared to the US, and various other topics. They chatted on until their discussion was interrupted by Sabas, who let them know they had reached their destination. Stepping out of the car, Tsuna's gaze fell upon the bustling streetball court. The court was divided into two sections, with one side occupied by younger players. Though Tsuna noted that these youngsters were around his age, he couldn't help but turn to Alexandra with a questioning glance, his finger gesturing toward the teens. "Do you want me to join in with them?" Amusement danced in Alexandra's eyes as she chuckled, her head shaking gently. "No worries, I have got a team ready for you to join in. Follow me, and I'll introduce you to everyone." With a nod, Tsuna followed Alexandra to another part of the court. Here, a group of people sat, engrossed in lively conversation. "Alex! Finally, we've been waiting." One of the guys with blonde hair greeted Alexandra. "Well, sorry for making you guys wait." Alexandra apologized. She then turned to Tsuna and introduced him to her team, "And I got you guys your final player. Hey there, I'm Tsuna." "Nice to meet you all," Tsuna introduced himself with a nod. Each of them seemed taken aback by his presence. Taking the initiative, Alexandra pointed to each of her friends, introducing them in turn. "This blonde guy is Chris, the one with the bald head is Ben, the guy with the tattoo on his face is Johnny, and our fellow Asian teammate is Richard." "Alex, are you serious? He looks so young for this court." "Chris, the blonde guy?" questioned Alexandra. Tsuna did appear notably younger than the rest of them. "Come on, you know I promised a solid player," Alexandra insisted, trying to persuade them. "Tsuna's definitely the best addition we could have right now. Trust me." Shaking his head, Ben tossed the ball from hand to hand before passing it to Tsuna. Tsuna caught it smoothly, exuding a calm demeanor. "Well, let's put it to the test then." Turning to Tsuna, Ben asked, "What's your take on this?" Tsuna responded with a smile, saying, "Sure, why not?" Chapter 24, Chapter 22, Competing for the Court. However, a group of people entered the basketball courts. They were met with a lively chatter that prompted them to look toward the noise. Observing the group gathered, Ben's brow furrowed, and he turned to Tsuna. "Change of plan. There's no time for a test. Our opponents are here." Taking it in stride, Tsuna responded calmly as he glanced toward the newcomers and then back at Ben. "Well, I suppose we have to roll with it. Thanks for giving me a shot." Ben shook his head, pointing to Alexandra conversing with their opponents. "It's not about trusting you. I trust her." "I understand," Tsuna replied with a smile. He didn't take offense to Ben's guarded response. It was a sensible approach, especially considering Tsuna's significantly younger age. Ben's cautiousness regarding the game garnered Tsuna's respect. Surveying the team, Tsuna grasped that each member shared a genuine passion for basketball and a collective desire to win. "Who's the little guy? No way you are letting him play, right?" A mocking voice sliced through the friendly chatter, drawing everyone's attention toward a guy with a tattoo on his neck and short black hair. The conversation quieted down abruptly, eyes shifting to the source of the voice. The leader of their opponents, a blonde guy sporting sunglasses, intervened. Freddie, no need to be rude," the blonde leader chided, then turned his attention to Johnny. He sought confirmation, "He's probably too young to play, right, John?" Tsuna stood at a height of 165 centimeters, which was reasonably tall for his age, but he appeared comparatively shorter than the other players on the court. Johnny's response was muted, caught in a moment of uncertainty. Their team was short a player due to a recent departure, so they needed a replacement. Ben, the decision-maker, hadn't made his call on Tsuna yet. So, Johnny's gaze swiveled toward Ben for guidance. Freddy raised an eyebrow at this awkward exchange between them, his curiosity piqued. No way. Really? Yeah, this guy's on our team for this game, Ben confirmed, addressing everyone on his team. His team members reacted with nonchalant shrugs, placing their trust in Ben's judgment. As the team leader, he held the final say in these matters. Furthermore, they believed in Alexandra, she rarely steered them wrong on such matters. Freddy, however, seemed to lose his composure, bursting into hearty laughter. He turned to his teammates, dripping sarcasm, "Oh boy, we're in for a real treat." His teammates, excluding the sunglass-wearing blonde leader, joined in the laughter. Yet, a subtle, amused grin tugged at the corner of the blonde leader's mouth, his demeanor suggesting he already deemed this game a sure victory. Seriously? Chris muttered under his breath, his tone a mix of exasperation and amusement. He had grown accustomed to the opposing team's irritating behavior, but they did excel at delivering unexpected twists like this. Observing the unfolding scenario, Alexandra shook her head in mild amusement. "They say you should never wake a sleeping dragon," she mused quietly. Turning her attention to Tsuna, who wore a serene smile while observing the scene, she muttered under her breath, "He's annoyed." The sunglass-wearing blonde took charge, clapping his hands to draw the group's focus. He then addressed Ben, "We're starting in 5 minutes, okay?" Ben affirmed this with a nod, communicating to his own team, "Sure thing. 5 minutes. Perfect. Let's get going." With this, the blonde leader left the bench, leading his team to another section of the court. Before leaving, Freddy directed a comment toward Tsuna, who maintained his calm smile. "Don't crush us too hard, all right?" He chuckled, his teammates joining in the laughter. Observing Tsuna's continued calm, Freddy's grin only broadened. "Don't worry, no need to cry. Your mom's not here." The laughter escalated, and Tsuna's smile stretched even wider in response. Observing the unfolding scenario, Alexandra couldn't help but slap her forehead in exasperation. She recognized that their opponents had undoubtedly stirred the pot. Concerned about the potential impact of the taunting, Ben turned to Tsuna, inquiring with an evident worry, "You doing all right?" Now regaining his customary composed demeanor, Tsuna replied with a calm assurance, "No need to fret over that." However, a cold glint in his eyes displayed his clear displeasure at the unnecessary teasing. Ben's relief was palpable as he saw that Tsuna wasn't taking the bait. Ben then shifted his focus to the rest of the team, rallying them with determination. "All right, let's get ready." Street basketball was a less formal version of the game, often played on courts without strict rules. It provided a platform for players to display their skills and entertain the crowd. As the game got underway, someone from the watching crowd tossed the ball into play. Unfortunately, it ended up in the hands of the opposing team. Tsuna watched closely, surprised by the skill level of his opponents. He couldn't help but think, "They're good. But my teammates aren't too shabby either." A spark of excitement ignited within him as the game went on. Under pressure from Tsuna's team, the opposing player passed the ball to Freddy. It became apparent that Freddy was a standout player among them. Swiftly navigating through the defense, he scored 2 points for his side. Freddy couldn't resist taunting Tsuna, making a mock crying face. In response, Tsuna's expression remained friendly, a smile forming on his lips. "Hey, Ben, pass the ball over to me." Ben nodded in agreement. As the ball was handed to Tsuna, Freddy stepped up his defense. Tsuna's smile grew in the face of Freddy's challenge. Instead of charging ahead, Tsuna decided to pass the ball to Richard. While Freddy braced himself for a challenge, Tsuna cleverly slipped past him and positioned himself for a better shot. Richard got the ball back to Tsuna in sync, leading to a perfect layup. Freddy, expecting Tsuna to show off, was disappointed by Tsuna's lack of reaction. This poked at Freddy's pride, leaving him a bit annoyed that someone younger was disregarding him. He felt like he wasn't being taken seriously. An internal cry of frustration echoed within Freddy's mind. As the game continued, his irritation grew. Every time he thought Tsuna would pass, Tsuna smoothly moved through toward the net. On the other hand, when Freddy anticipated Tsuna's drive, the ball ended up somewhere else. It seemed like Tsuna was purposefully playing games with him. Even his own teammates joined in, throwing teasing remarks at him and suggesting they switch positions. Eventually, fueled by anger, Freddy agreed to switch. Unfortunately for them, the same patterns kept unfolding. Gradually, the realization dawned on them: Tsuna's style of play was incredibly frustrating. What a clever strategy he employed! Faced with this, they abandoned marking him individually and resorted to a double-team tactic. Even Tsuna's own teammates grew wary of passing him the ball. They hadn't built enough trust in Tsuna's ability to break through the defense. It seemed only logical to steer clear of Tsuna for the time being. With each new point scored against them, their situation grew grimmer. Tsuna approached his team, trying to boost their spirits. "Don't worry. Just pass the ball to me." His teammates exchanged glances, unsure whether Tsuna was being overly confident. "He's still quite young." Ben sighed inwardly, watching Tsuna's determined stride as he positioned himself for their pass. Even when two opponents converged on Tsuna, their efforts to score were thwarted. The blonde player who had discarded his sunglasses demonstrated exceptional defense skills, causing considerable frustration for Tsuna's team. Tsuna found himself in a helpless position. His teammates lacked faith in him, and as a result, he rarely received the ball. With their score continuously plummeting, unease rippled through his teammates. During a dribble by Richard, a misstep led to a pass toward Tsunayashi, who found himself doggedly marked by two opponents. "Damn it!" Ben's frustration was palpable. He immediately issued orders: "Get back, defense!" They swiftly followed suit, retreating to protect their side of the court. Tsuna could only offer a resigned shake of his head. He didn't hold their hesitance against them. After all, he was still relatively young in their eyes. However, what happened next left everyone in shock. What in the world? Chapter 25, Chapter 23, Victory. Tsuna held the ball tightly and dribbled it with impressive speed, easily maneuvering around the defenders trying to double-team him. His quick movements showed that he was more agile than his opponents. "What the? Holy!" The defenders reacted with surprise and shock, struggling to keep up as Tsuna moved swiftly. Their team captain adjusted his position to block Tsuna's path, realizing the need to stop his progress. Remaining composed, Tsuna maintained a slight smile, anticipating their rapid reaction speed. He changed his direction suddenly, moving to the right, where the captain followed, attempting to steal the ball from him. In a split second, Tsuna rotated his body in the opposite direction, showcasing his lightning-fast reflexes, leaving the crowd amazed by his skill. However, just as it seemed Tsuna might have an opening, the blonde guy with no more sunglasses demonstrated similar agility and managed to intercept Tsuna's path. "You won't get by me," the blonde guy with no more sunglasses declared confidently. Tsuna's pleasant smile turned into a sly smirk, catching the guy off guard. "Maybe I won't, but we will," Tsuna stated, suddenly stopping while the ball mysteriously vanished from his grasp. The blonde guy with no more sunglasses watched in astonishment as Tsuna's move caught him entirely off guard. His eyes widened in disbelief as he processed what had just happened. He couldn't believe that Tsuna had managed to execute such a swift pass in such a brief moment, with very little opportunity to do so. With a hint of amazement in his voice, Ben complimented Tsuna's play. "Impressive pass, haha." Taking possession of the ball, Ben swiftly aimed and shot it toward the basket. Despite still grappling with the surprise of the unfolding events, the ball found its mark and went through the net, earning their team some much-needed points. The spectators in the crowd were left stunned by the sequence of events. Tsuna's quick and seemingly impossible pass had left them awestruck, and they exchanged bewildered glances with one another. The opposing team members were at a loss for words, clearly taken aback by Tsuna's unexpected maneuver. Even Tsuna's teammates wore expressions of shock as they processed the remarkable play that had just unfolded before them. "Like I said earlier, just pass the ball to me," Tsuna instructed his teammates, again taking his position. "Wow, I had no clue you had this skill level," Johnny burst out in amazement. The sentiment seemed to echo through the group, their surprise palpable. From the nearby court where the younger players were gathered, Taiga Kagami and Tatsuya Himuro watched Tsuna with wide eyes, clearly astonished. They had considered themselves quite good, yet here was someone of their own generation who surpassed their expectations. Back in the main game, Freddy and his team faced a predicament. Employing a double-team strategy against Tsunayashi appeared futile. He maneuvered as nimbly as an eel, effortlessly evading their attempts to corner him. "God damn it!" Freddy's frustration was evident as he clenched his teeth. "I'll handle him solo. Rest of you, focus on guarding the others." He directed this to his teammates, who had previously formed a double team against Tsunayashi. The blonde guy with no more sunglasses seemed to agree to this as he didn't say anything about this. "Don't disregard us, you idiot," However, this made them vulnerable for the others to attack their defense. Taking advantage of the opponent's rearranged strategy, Richard broke through their defense, scoring 2 points for his team. Freddy, remember we're ahead by 2 points. Just control the ball until time's up. The blonde guy with no more sunglasses said to Freddy. That's it. We can maintain possession till the game's end. Freddy thought to himself, dribbling the ball forward. His teammates skillfully passed among themselves, not intending to score more points. Witnessing this, Suna's brow furrowed. He drew a deep breath, gathered his focus, and approached Freddy, who was currently controlling the ball. Freddy, noticing Suna's approach, grinned arrogantly. Kid, you're not gonna outdo me, he jeered. But Suna didn't retort. His demeanor shifted, and he suddenly charged ahead, seemingly aiming to collide with Freddy and exert pressure. Taken off guard by Tsunayashi's boldness, Freddy reacted hastily, passing the ball to his teammate instinctively, yet the force behind the pass disrupted the catch. What a genius! Ha ha ha, Johnny seized the chance, snatching the ball and sending it Suna's way. Suna, already sprinting toward the opponent's hoop, caught it. Bruised pride pushing him, Freddy sprinted back to block Suna with all his might. With the ball in his grip, Suna was stunned to find Freddy positioned defensively before him. Suna's mind raced as he observed Freddy's expressions. He couldn't help but wonder if Freddy had deliberately held back in their earlier encounters. Yet, when Suna saw the frustration etched across Freddy's face, he swiftly dismissed the idea. This guy is simply incapable of such strategy. With the ball under his control, Suna maintained the rapid pace he had employed during his one-on-one match against Aomine back in Japan. He couldn't help but notice the disbelief evident in Freddy's widened eyes, a sight that filled Suna with a sense of accomplishment. Executing swift dribbles, Suna moved with the agility he had honed. He darted left, prompting Freddy to follow suit. But in a split second, Suna changed direction, transitioning to the right side. To his astonishment, Freddy mirrored Suna's move with uncanny precision. A sense of bewilderment enveloped Suna. It was astonishing to see a seemingly ordinary player following his every move. Yet, a closer examination of Freddy's gaze and stance allowed Suna to piece together the puzzle. This player, seemingly insignificant on the street ball court, possessed an innate instinct akin to that of a fierce beast. A beast instinct player. The revelation surprised Suna, but he couldn't help but feel a touch of amusement. It's like the instinct of a chihuahua, Suna murmured inwardly, a smirk gracing his lips. That's cute. Now, you can't win, you punk. Freddy's determination was palpable as he finally attempted to snatch the ball from Tsunayashi's grip, his voice echoing his fierce resolve. Breaking your defense isn't my only option, he retorted calmly, maneuvering the ball toward Richard, who stood unguarded. Good job. Amidst the unfolding action, Richard's enthusiastic voice rang out, capturing the moment's anticipation. With a skillful shot from beyond the arc, the ball arced through the air before gracefully finding its mark in the net. The resounding swoosh signaled adding 3 points to their score, clinching their victory by a single point. Whoa! The spectators erupted in jubilation, their earlier skepticism giving way to elation. Suna's teammates were euphoric, their cheers a chorus of celebration. Their gazes turned to Tsuna, inviting him to join the collective joy filling the air. As the cheers reverberated around him, Tsuna's smile conveyed both satisfaction and a renewed determination. That was a good game. However, it seems like I should put more training into my schedule. Tsuna thought silently as he looked at Freddy, who seemed to be frustrated. The unexpected skill displayed by an unknown player had given him valuable insight. He recognized the need never to underestimate anyone, regardless of their appearance or reputation. This match had taught him a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. On the opposite side of the court, Alexandra's eyes were wide with disbelief as she watched Tsuna's exceptional performance. He's managed to enhance his skills significantly in such a short span of time. Her thoughts swirled in quiet astonishment. While she was well aware of Tsuna's extraordinary potential, witnessing the extent of his progress left her stunned. Despite her amazement, Alexandra pushed aside her musings, choosing instead to fully embrace the electrifying atmosphere. Alongside the exhilarated crowd, she joined in the enthusiastic cheers, reveling in the excitement of the remarkable match that had unfolded before them.
Thanks for listening.